Welcome to Galar, the land irradiated by a giant five-headed dragon from beyond the stars. Its ecology is a wild one, fit with the strongest and most ruthless Pokemon across any region. Corviknight with bodies of steel flying through the skies. The living apple pie that is Appletun hunting for bugs. Hattrem that will pummel you to dust just for having strong emotions. And a living bear trap that isn't afraid to target humans with a fake Pokeball at its center. But greater than all of this is the power of Eternatus, who grants Pokemon the ability to Dynamax and Gigantamax in the wild, becoming massive daikaiju capable of destroying the entire region, only stopped by the power of Zacian and Zamazenta, who rest deeply within the Slumbering Weald. I've covered the ecology from Kanto to Alola, and now it's time for the complete ecology of Galar's harsh region. Howdy there, I'm Acrylic, and it's been a while since we've gone through the ecology of an entire region, ZA not counting. So let's quickly get through how in the world we even figure out Pokemon ecology. If you don't want to know how the sausage gets made, just jump to the next chapter in the video. Now, starting with understanding that ecology is the interaction between Pokemon and each other, or Pokemon and the environment, meaning we will be focusing on routes and natural locations, not any places created by humans, well, with some exceptions. In addition, Pokemon do have encounter rates on every single route, and while this isn't going to tell us exactly how many Pokemon exist in areas off of the route, it does give us a very strong idea how many Pokemon might be in the area overall. This is honestly no different than surveying in the real world. So for example, a Hoot might appear 5% of the time, meaning that out of 100 times you would encounter a Pokemon, you would run into 5 different Hoot if the surveying is done right. In Galar, there are also hidden encounters, visible wandering encounters, fishing encounters, and more. We are going to be ignoring the curry encounters since many of those are just repeat Pokemon being attracted by us using curry, like bait. We also won't be counting any Pokemon we do not find in the wild, meaning that Pokemon like Shedinja, who are only found in raid battles, will not be talked about. They don't really have an interaction regarding the rest of the Pokemon in the area that we can actually see or make reasonable guesses at. There are Pokemon that are more active at different times of day in lore, but in this, they don't have day or night spawns. We do have some wild weather in some locations, so we'll deal with that as it comes. Now, Bulbapedia is going to be a big help, as it is basically impossible to get all this info or even visuals for everything with how the encounters work. Otherwise, I'd have to time travel through every single day for the next 50 years to get a 1% spawn chance in sunny weather, and you're not going to care anyway because most of you just listen to this. Thank you for listening. I appreciate that. And finally, we're going to dig into each Pokemon's habits, their diets, and use Pokemon info first before using their real-life inspirations to help us figure all of that out and how they do interact with the overall ecological system. Because while Pokemon such as Galarian Farfetch'd are based on ducks who eat their fill of tubers, fish, bugs, seeds, and so much more, Farfetch'd and its dex states that it literally only eats the giant leek that it carries, or at least the original Farfetch'd. So instead of talking about this and how it gets figured out the entire time, how about we actually get started with the climate of Galar. Galar is known to be incredibly harsh, and this is due to a mix of events overall. One is because of pollution caused by humanity, the other is likely because of Eternatus crashing down onto the lands long ago as a meteor 20,000 years ago. This event would have likely been incredibly similar to what we see with any other major meteoric event, like, the one that jump-started the end of the world for the dinosaurs. But don't worry, Eternatus' crash landing doesn't line up with any sort of event like that, oddly enough. Fast forward 17,000 years and we have the Darkest Day, which hilariously would have been a perfect event to help cause the end of not just the dinosaurs, but a lot of life as we know it. Because as Eternatus reaches its full power and blots out the sun, we have a massive issue on our hands. No light means no heat. No sunlight means the plants won't be able to live and thrive. The world becomes cold, the loss of plants causes the ground to become unstable, as there aren't any roots to hold the soil in place as the wind just starts to blow across the lands, and overall it's just a really, really bad time. This then will eventually cause a massive shift in climate that changes the region into something where only the strongest, the most durable, the most willing to adapt, and the ones with the widest diet available to them will be able to survive. All Pokemon that we find in Galar have a way to survive, finding their niche habitats, being incredibly aggressive, you name it. There are very few exceptions to this rule, and it's all because only the ones who can adapt or tough out the pressure will survive and thrive in this region. This isn't to say all of Galar is bad, as many of our routes are pretty tame and nice overall, and so are many of the cities, as they're decked out with renewable energy sources, whether that be hydroelectricity or Galar particles themselves, but we'll get to some of that much later. Because of all of this, the climate shift can be simplified to being one that transformed from a warmer environment, maybe even similar to what we see in Hoenn, into one that is overall a bit chillier by comparison. Again, this is not the case for all of Galar, since even the southern parts are definitely a bit warmer when compared to northern parts. But enough of all that, let's start digging into not the first route, but rather the Slumbering Weald. Otherwise known as the Slumbering Forest, this is an area that is cut into two parts. One being where we first enter, the southern area, and the other being the northern area, which holds some way more powerful Pokemon. In this dark forest, we get to start with Hoothoot. With inspiration from the horned owl and owls in general, typically being obligate carnivores, Hoothoot has a number of different meals to choose from within the comfort of darkness. Even without light filtering through, they'll cry out at the same time every single day. This is of course because of a special internal organ that allows them to sense the world's rotation. I guess if you're shaped like a ball, you can understand larger balls in the universe. I could have probably phrased that better. As such, this living clock will bide its time in the treetops just out of view of the prey that are in the area. This is supported by Hoothoot exclusively being a hidden encounter. And as for their prey, one of which is actually Grubbin, which we do find here. We could also expect Hoothoot to eat any other bug that it pleases, like the blip bug that are here, and maybe even a squavit, since those are here as well. The interesting part is that even though the forest is pretty dark, since Hoothoot is a nocturnal creature, its encounter rate is still pretty low at 15%, meaning they're not going to be a common sight, likely just because we are still around during the daytime. Moving on to Grubbin, they can be found between hidden and visible encounters, and they just love to eat sap from trees and most likely also eat humus from the ground. At least we can assume as much, since Grubbin itself doesn't state a diet of humus, but it has very similar habits to its evolution Charjabug, who does directly state that it eats humus. And to better explain what humus is, it is the dark, rich, organic material that is formed inside of soil from decomposing plant and animal matter. It's where all the nutrients are sitting, just waiting to be absorbed into something else, whether that be through mechanical eating or otherwise. What I didn't realize until now is that the reason why Grubbin, or at least Charjabug, eats humus is because they lack proper teeth. Sure, they might have mandibles, but they don't have molars to grind down food or anything else. The best they could do is rip pieces off, pinch things that attack them, or try to carry something. They can't grind it down into something more easily digestible. And yes, that is still the case for Charjabug and its sideways mouth teeth. That's just not going to be efficient for anything other than ripping and tearing until it is done. But that's why we chew our food. That's why some animals chew plants for a very long time. It's because by chewing and mixing the food with your enzyme-rich saliva, you're able to break down the food so you can more easily digest it later on. Meanwhile, Grubbin is basically getting the mama bird treatment from Mother Nature itself. Grubbin are mostly going to mind their own business because of this. They'll dig underground as they live there mostly, till up the soil as they move, which helps plants grow better, and then use a mixture of its sticky threads and large mandibles to deter prey from trying to eat it. It releases sticky threads that it can use as a suspension wire, or even stop opponents from moving before it can grab them with mandibles strong enough to snap thick tree branches. Typically, you might find them near electrical power plants, but of course, none of that is here in the Weald. Instead, with it being such a dense forest, it's here because of all the humus that would be building up from things such as fallen leaves. Those mandibles we mentioned are also capable of scaring away its natural enemies, which are Rookity and Hoothoot. They would much rather run away than risk getting caught in Grubbin's mandibles, which are, I assume, about 5 inches in length, since the total length of this Pokemon is 1'4", which that would be 12.7 centimeters for mandible length, or roughly 41 centimeters for its full body length, for those of you that use the superior system of measurement. I might be American, but science has taught me the true way of things. At the end of the day, Grubbin will sleep on dirt that they've dug up, which is believed to be the fluffiest and most comfortable dirt according to that little grub. And honestly, Grubbin matches really well with exactly what it's likely based on, which is beetle larvae. I didn't talk about this in my Alola Ecology, I realize, so beetle larvae pretty much have the same diet in a more indirect way. They like pretty much anything that is rotten or rotting, except for conifers and pine trees because they're toxic to the larva. This further explains why we find grubbin in this forest and in Alola, places where we really don't see any pine trees. Up next is Squavit, who makes up 50% of the hidden encounters and 40% of the visible encounters, making them take up most of the population of the southern area of this forest, which, who would have guessed? Squirrels. It's the fattest faced squirrel you'll ever see this side of the region, using its special cheeks, which can stretch to many times its normal volume. Squavit can stuff a tremendous amount of food into its mouth, such as berries, which makes me wonder, what is the volume of a squirrel's mouth? This feels like cursed knowledge, but here we go anyway. Because after looking into it, an average ground squirrel can apparently store 2 walnuts in their mouths, which also apparently amounts to 2 to 3 cubic inches, or 32.8 to 49.2 cubic centimeters. So I'm just going to assume, since they're kind of the same size as some squirrels in the real world, minus their massive head, they might actually just hold the same amount of food, at best double. If Squavit is feeling full, it can temporarily keep the extra food in its tail fur. It's like me when I eat and there's crumbs in my mustache so I can eat it later. What a treat. Squavit's habit of eating berries nonstop has made it more resilient than it appears. If its cheeks are ever completely empty of berries, it becomes very uneasy. In fact, it gets anxious even if it has a full stomach, which is why it constantly stuffs berries into its cheeks and tail for fear of getting hungry whatsoever. It may even stuff its cheeks with pebbles if it can't find any berries nearby. They'll appear on farms looking for more berries to eat, and when they are not eating berries, they spit out the seeds in the rich soil in order to cultivate berry trees. And this actually leads me to the idea that squirrels bury so many nuts that they forget where they bury all their food, and apparently that is just a lie. According to an article in Scientific American, a growing body of research suggests that they do remember. They're not just burying a bunch of stuff and hoping that they'll find it in the future, they're strategizing quite a lot, says Lisa Lever, a researcher who studies the behavioral and cognitive adaptations of squirrels and other animals at the University of Exeter in England. In fact, squirrels take 2 methodical approaches to storing their food. Larder hoarding, in which the fluffy-tailed rodents bury their entire bounty in 1 or 2 locations, and scatter hoarding, which involves the squirrels splitting a stash among multiple locations dotted across a landscape. Really useful for if conditions get really bad where they're living and they have to vamoose. Now, Gumshoes is Squavit's natural predator, which is incredibly strange considering Gumshoes also choose Rattata as their favorite prey, but those two don't simultaneously naturally occur in any region together without Rattata also being an invasive species like it is in Alola. Funnily, while real squirrels might be more omnivorous, it seems to be clear that Squavit is exclusively eating berries and nuts. We can also support this because when we step into routes later on, we'll find that Pokemon will evolve when they have an excess of food or are put under a lot of pressure, which is shown through them fighting each other for resources or if they're being hunted and have to evolve in order to defend themselves. We see none of that here, spoiler alert. And later on, we're gonna see a lot of ingredients in trees all by themselves. Another bird hiding in the trees and bouncing around in the open is Rookity, my favorite line of bird Pokemon if you don't count Togekiss as a bird. Now, Rookity are feisty and territorial Pokemon and will bravely fight against anybody, no matter how big and strong that opponent is. This is honestly no different from a blackbird in the real world, as I've handled red-winged blackbirds and they're like little demons. Their bites don't really hurt, at least, or at least the ones that bit me didn't bite hard enough for it to hurt. So don't go just grabbing these birds and not expecting to get hurt. To explain that better, I was supposed to tag some ducks for tracking with the Department of Natural Resources, and unfortunately, instead of the marsh ducks flocking in for all the seed that was laid out, literal hundreds of blackbirds took to the feed instead. So that was a bust for research, as only about 4 ducks were tagged, but I at least got to see the beautiful sunrise over the marsh as all the colors of the worlds were slowly painted back onto the canvas of life that it was. It's one of my happy places, if you can't tell. Back to Rookity though, they are able to store some of their own energy after every battle, so they can grow a bit stronger even if they lose, meaning they are effectively the Saiyans of the Pokemon world. Rookity is canonically out here getting the Zenkai boost from Dragon Ball Z. Now, using their legs, they're able to jump nimbly from place to place to confuse Pokemon bigger than themselves. This is also a habit that a lot of real-life birds do, as just jumping in general is just more energy efficient than walking. Female Rookity are fussier than the males and will relentlessly attack anyone who dirties its wings. They too are noted to prey on Grubbin, as stated earlier. Nothing too crazy to talk about here, so let's just remember that Rookity just doesn't care what or who you are. Whether you are a baby or the largest of hawks, Rookity are just like real blackbirds. They will just attack you and bully you out of what they think belongs to them, their territory. Though maybe you could try yelling at them, at least not showing that you're afraid at all. There was one blackbird nest that I had to keep passing by during Streamwater research, and I know I'm telling a lot of stories this time, but it's ecology. Can you blame me? And it left me alone, but not my team. Probably because I was literally yelling at it as if it could understand me, when we all know it can't. Now, before we do move on to the next Pokemon, I did forget for a while there that Rookity's design and name is very much inspired by chickadees. You know, the ones that sound like chickadee-dee-dee, rickety-dee-dee, you get it? Now, even more specifically, it has designs after the Eurasian blue tit, the great tit, and the Japanese tit. So, yes, Rookity, more realistically, has combinations of corvids, chickadees, and tits. And yes, I'm very happy that I got to say that word so many times and justify it scientifically. I try to stay family friendly on the videos, so anytime I can find an excuse or a loophole, it feels like I'm winning the lottery. Moving on to the last Pokemon of the southern area, we have Blipbug, which I never really think about it until I see this guy. But yeah, ladybugs do have larvae, and they're kind of a bit spooky looking. They aren't as spooky as other insects like the Dobson fly, which I have never seen a male in person with their absurdly long and scary looking pincers, and I'm all the better for it. Nevertheless, the intimidating, spiky presentation of the ladybug or lady beetle larva did not completely translate over to Blipbug, but its coloration and some of these spikes did, with a pair of those spikes turning into a bow tie for this little Poindexter. They're noted to often be found in gardens, and it uses the hairs on its body in order to assess its surroundings. It is noted to be a very weak Pokemon that is very smart and constantly collects information. Little guy's out here working out at the library. I actually also remember picking up this little guy for a while in my first run through Sword and Shield so many years ago. And I was only ever disappointed when I realized I couldn't G-Max it at all in my playthrough without the DLC later on, which, you know, hurt my soul because I didn't want to catch a new one. After all, I had already named this one, and I think that name was probably something simple like Bookworm. Now, Blipbug's entire line says nothing about its diet, and before someone says they all eat curry, I want a natural diet. Or, you know, not just saying they all eat berries, because not every Pokemon canonically eats berries. Some are canonical, pure, obligate carnivores according to their Dex entries. In addition, thanks to the 31st, which you should go check out their channel, we were able to confirm that Pokemon such as Metapod, who canonically do not eat at all, get the smallest portion of curry possible whenever curry is made, which is a really cool detail in this game. It turns out that larvae, similar to their full-grown ladybug selves, are primarily carnivorous predators focusing on eating soft-bodied creatures like aphids, mealybugs, mites, and insect eggs, which we have none of those around here unless they are cannibalizing each other, which is another trait of ladybugs, I suppose. And to be entirely fair, any animal will eat anything if they are desperate enough. I've seen videos of goats just popping a little baby chick into its mouth like popcorn, and yes, I did laugh out of shock. It caught me off guard, as it should anybody the first time they see it. So this is a strange one, right? Because if Blipbug here is known to be weak, and the only plausible bug prey in the area is Grubbin, who will absolutely decimate this nerd and shove him into a locker, then that means Blipbug likely goes completely against its real-life counterpart's diet and might instead just be eating fruits and veggies. Even when looking at other routes, there really is nothing we can say to support Blipbug hunting other Pokemon, which is fine. This isn't the first Pokemon to go completely in the opposite direction of diets of its real-life inspirations, but we leave the Weald for now. And what, did you expect that I would immediately go to the northern section with the level 45 Pokemon and talk about Zacian and Zamazenta? No! We have to build up to that, just like in the games. We'll be back. Don't you worry. But before we do continue on to Route 1, I just want to say thank you for watching. I'm very excited to finally be digging into this challenging ecology. It's a lot of info to wade through and organize, especially with weather patterns later on. If you've enjoyed so far, subscribe to the channel for more in-depth ecology and lore of the Pokemon world and how it connects to our world. In addition, leave a comment about your favorite Galarmon or even your first playthrough. My personal favorites are definitely going to go to Corviknight and Dragapult. Comments help boost the reach of a video, as does watch time, and if you'd like to go the extra mile, become a member for as little as $3 a month to get sneak peeks, early access to videos, read my ramblings in between videos that nobody else gets to see, and your name in the credits of every video. In addition, I did start up a new channel with much shorter videos. Instead of multi-hour long videos, I also have a secondary channel, which is Professor Acrylic. Very short, shorter than 10-minute videos is going to be my goal every single time, with higher level editing. So go check that out. I have a whole video, 4 minutes long, about Jirachi and how it created Mega Rayquaza. So go subscribe there, and once again, thank you for watching, and on with this video. Route 1 is technically the first place we could have gotten an encounter, but it's definitely more interesting to start with the Weald in my opinion, because here we find Hoot in small numbers, Grubbin, who is completely hidden in the grass, Squavit taking up nearly half of the encounters, I mean, what would you expect of a rodent, and Blipbug, who is also only found hidden in the grass. One other that is only found hiding away is Caterpie, which of course is another little grub just waiting to get snatched up by our predators, though it does at least grow quickly and can defend itself by entangling foes with silk or deterring them with the terrible stench they emit from the horns on their head. Otherwise, most of their time is spent trying to satiate their immense hunger as they devour tons of leaves. Makes perfect sense that it's hiding away like this because not only are there Hoot and Rookity to deal with in this area, the Rookity specifically making up a large population, second only to Squavit, as they bounce out in the open, but then we have our next entry being Nickit. A cunning thief, Nickit enjoys stealing food from others instead of spending their time finding food on their own. They have incredibly soft pads that compress lightly when in contact with the ground, allowing them to move silently without being noticed. They can use their tails to sweep their paw prints, so it can even be hard to locate them. Now, foxes are omnivores. They'll eat meat, they'll eat bugs, they'll gnaw on some twigs if they have to. They have a pretty open diet, which is strongly attributed to their survival, as the more options you have for food, the more likely you are to survive when one of those sources becomes scarce. With that in mind, we know that Nickit is likely not only eating Caterpie, Grubbin, and Blipbug, but might even go after our birds from time to time. It has the lowest population here, which is equal to Hoot. And you might ask, why haven't any of these Pokemon evolved then? Don't they have to fight back against a Nickit? And you would be correct, but since there are so many different Pokemon for a Nickit to eat, and there's such a small population of this fox, it means that there isn't enough pressure to cause any of these Pokemon to evolve. Also, realize something funny? Nickit is on Route 1 as a thief, like how thieves and pickpockets will actively target tourists or people who are generally new to an area. Nickit is like the literal perfect little con artist, and I'm suddenly a much bigger fan. I'm gonna admit now though, I don't really care for its evolution, sadly. The only other Pokemon wandering around here is of course Wooloo. Wooloo's fleece is extremely fluffy and can serve as a cushion, allowing it to survive even a fall from a cliff without any injuries. Cue the bird falling from the cliff video. I don't think that poor thing survived. I honestly forget all the time if it does or doesn't. Now, Wooloo's fur grows continuously, being able to fully grow back in just 3 months after it is completely shaved. Sheep in the real world do need to be sheared, or else it could result in a number of different issues that could go even as far as affecting their health. Insects could lie beneath the wool, they could develop rashes, and overall they can just become so heavy they are unable to move, such as with Shrek and Alex the sheep. Alex had 88 pounds or 40 kilograms of wool, and Shrek had 60 pounds or 27 kilograms, which is wild. Shrek looks like a, cute little guy, but that's still not healthy for him. Now, the fur of Wooloo is a specialty product in Galar, being used for clothing and carpets. The clothing made from Wooloo's wool has remarkable strength. If its fur grows too long, it is noted to be unable to move. And they live in herds and are known to mimic the actions of their herd leader or trainer, which is adorable, and all I'm hearing is that they are giant puppies. Please surround me in an army of Wooloo, in a horde of them if you would, and just let me perish peacefully. Now, they have a very friendly disposition and dislike conflict and can escape from enemies by simply rolling away. And lastly, Yamper is used to herd Wooloo. they really aren't doing much here in the wild. They're eating the grass, which long term will get rid of hiding spaces for bug Pokemon, causing them to move around more, which will in turn cause those bugs to be seen by Rookidee, Nickit, and Hoothoot, which then helps balance out the ecology in this area. And if you're worried about Wooloo needing to be sheared, wild sheep are able to shed their wool seasonally, just like how other animals shed their coat. In addition, we might say that Nickit will potentially try to attack Wooloo, but I genuinely believe this would be a very, very rare occurrence. On to Route 2, returning Pokemon are Hoothoot, Rookidee, a little over a quarter of the population, Blipbug completely hiding away and taking up nearly half the population for hidden encounters, Squavit in similar amounts to Blipbug out in the open, Nickit, and then there's all of our new Pokemon. Starting with the hidden encounters, we have plant Pokemon in Lotad and Seedot. Lotad is a clean little guy that is able to live in the harshness of Galar because its leaf is a natural dirt repellent. So even if there is a lot of pollution, we can assume that the leaf is repelling more than just dirt, so that way the photosynthesis process isn't being interrupted. They're constantly searching for clean water, so we can even use them as an indicator for the quality of water within Galar as it continues to recover from ecological damage, which it's hard to say if the water here is actually of high quality, considering the Lotad are hidden encounters within the grass and not the water itself. Pokemon typically aren't going to attack Lotad, and between it and Lombre, it seems to focus more on eating seeds and berries, as at least Lombre competes with birds for food. Though there are birds that eat bugs and prey upon other Pokemon, Lombre's appearance has never caused pressure on any other Pokemon from what I've been able to find, meaning that they aren't hunting other Pokemon at all from my understanding, and again are only competing for seeds and berries. In addition, Pokemon really aren't going to prey upon Lotad, at least not in this exact scenario, though we may find a reason why it isn't in the water soon enough when we talk about the fishing encounters. Also, Lotad primarily has to rely on its lily pad in order to survive, as it gives it most of the energy with water and sunlight and so on and so forth. Moving on with Seedot though, they're super simple Pokemon. They absorb nutrients from trees while hanging from them, they polish themselves, which sounds dirty, but it's just their way of making themselves more visible to bird Pokemon. This is because they want to be carried away to other areas within the regions that they live in. What's interesting about this is that this is effectively no different from any other seed in the real world. Obviously, those seeds aren't actively polishing themselves, but maybe they are shinier when they're being created, or they've adapted to be more obvious. And for another example, peppers produce capsaicin, which is spicy to pretty much everything to my understanding except for birds. This is their attempt to have the fruit of their body eaten and the seeds spread throughout the lands via bird poop. Honestly, a lot of plants will co-evolve alongside animals. There are flowers that hummingbirds have specialized their beaks for. There's a flower that can't pollinate normally, so it shapes itself like a bee. The bee mates with the flower, and then that bee spreads that flower's pollen. The flower is literally called the bee orchid, and it's actually a little funny to me. Imagine being catfished by a plant. So yeah, plants are a bit wild, and people sleep on them way more than they should. And with Seedot, it seems like this would be a landing spot for it, since it is only found as a hidden encounter, meaning these specifically aren't Seedot from this area and are not polishing themselves to be found. They want to stay here. Up next, we have Purloin taking up less than 1/10 of the population and hiding away in the grass. And it is canonical that Purloin and Nickit are rivals in every sense. This is ultimately because they fill most of the same niche, with Purloin also being mischievous and feeling amusement from the frustration of those that it steals from. The difference though between Purloin and Nickit is that Purloin, being a cat, is an obligate carnivore, meaning that they're going to have different diets, but if at any point Nickit encroaches on Purloin's territory in search of the same food, there will be war. The reason why Purloin is hiding away is because we have Squavit and Rookidee out in the open, so in order to catch their food, they of course would be hiding away in the tall grass, stalking their prey. Now though, we move on to the fishing encounters. 80% of the population is made up of Magikarp, because of course it is. These Pokemon are everywhere in every region except for Unova, unless we look at the natural reserve there, which I've said this before in other videos, and I'm going to say it here. The same could be said about the real-life Asian carp that were not in New York, but were in a nature reserve and eventually broke out to become an invasive species there. Give me black 3, white 3, and they will give us a breakout of Magikarp. I guarantee it, if they follow real-life history. Now, this fish is nice and simple. It's hardy. It can survive out of the water, and it just serves as a bottom feeder and a great food source for Pokemon that spend all of its time adapting to the Galarian climate. Though, here is where we will also see 2 new predators to Magikarp, other than, you know, a couple of the other ones, like our cats and our foxes. Bear with me on my storytelling. Starting with Choodle, the snapping turtle. Inside Choodle's mouth is a dark orange tongue and a single large tooth, the latter of which it can use to bite down hard on targets, not letting them go. The tongue is also used by real-life snapping turtles as like a worm decoy to lure them in or lure fish in so that way they can, you know, eat. It can even hang on from low heights for a period of time using just its teeth. What might surprise you, as it surprised me, is that Choodle may not be that much of an exaggeration of the real-life snapping turtle, or even more specifically, the alligator snapping turtle in its evolution. Because with real-life snapping turtles, depending on the species, it can completely break bones with their bites. Now, Choodle snaps at anything in front of it because of an itch of its teething. Sometimes it bites at another Choodle's horn, causing the two to fight with each other. And apparently there's a popular children's game involving Choodle. The game involves children lifting Choodle, holding onto a stick, and seeing which one can hold onto the stick the longest. This lines up with real snapping turtles once again, but for a different reason, as they bite at anything because they are opportunistic omnivores. This easily puts Magikarp and the next Pokemon at risk, and explains one of the reasons that we do not see Lotad in this water, as our other friend is Arrokuda. They can only swim in a straight line, and should they see any movement near it, it will charge ahead using its sharp, pointed jaws. However, its poor eyesight causes it to miss frequently. Its movements also tend to become sluggish when it eats too much, which is typically when Cramorant and Wattrel appear to swallow it up, of course Wattrel only being in Paldea. Cramorant is the natural predator of Arrokuda, even though they're not in this area, and they will grab Arrokuda in their mouth and spit it out when they're attacked during the process of swallowing, which then causes Arrokuda to be launched, as per its namesake, like an arrow. Arrokuda's other namesake is the Barracuda, which once again is very much the same in habits and overall likeness. In fact, let's take a tangent to learn about Barracuda, because they are absolutely a misunderstood creature, probably due to Finding Nemo propaganda. We could thank Oceana's website for the following information. Great barracudas have a large mouth containing 2 sets of teeth. The outer row of small razor-sharp teeth are for tearing, and the inner set of larger teeth for piercing. These closely set teeth work in tandem to rip into the flesh of their prey. The long and needle-like teeth fit into holes in the opposing jaw, which allows the barracuda to fully close its mouth. It's like a needle literally going into a hole, latching in, which is freaky. When hunting, they alternate between swallowing smaller prey whole and cutting larger prey in half to be devoured in pieces. They are opportunistic predators that hunt mainly by sight. Great barracudas are naturally inquisitive. Because they hunt mainly by sight, they sometimes attempt to steal fish from spearfishers or approach divers, mistaking the glint of a diving knife as a shiny fish. Despite this behavior, barracudas rarely attack humans unprovoked. Adult barracudas are large fish, some exceeding 5 feet long and weighing more than 100 pounds, with a lifespan of around 14 years in the wild. Given their size and speed, barracudas do not have many predators capable of catching and eating them. And as it turns out, I was wrong when I stated in previous videos that barracuda have bad eyesight. They have great eyesight, but since they are opportunistic predators, they attack typically before fully identifying their target, especially with that glinting that we just talked about. So, from my understanding then, Arrokuda are gonna be just as opportunistic in their eating habits, which puts anything that goes into the water, on top of the water, wherever it is, at risk of being bitten and potentially eaten. Back onto land with the visible encounters, we get the incredibly rare encounter of Zigzagoon at a 2% rate. Much like the Zigzagoon found outside of Galar, Galarian Zigzagoon are known to be constantly on the move and never settling down. It is believed that their restless temperament is what originated the zigzag movements observed on both forms of the species. This then effectively means that Galarian Zigzagoon is the original Zigzagoon. Their known habitat stretches the entirety of Galar, being found in fields, forests, and towns. They enjoy battling to the point where they often attempt to provoke others into fighting them, and while this succeeded with other Pokemon, humans instead tend to mistake it as wanting affection, much to the Zigzagoon's frustrations. I mean, it's literally sticking out its tongue and probably looks like it's dancing in front of us as it's waiting for us to attack it when we just think it's cute, scoop it up in our arms, hug it, squeeze it, name it George. I honestly would be doing the same exact thing as all the Galarians would have, or I guess all the people who took Galarian Zigzagoon to Hoenn and other regions. Now, despite Zigzagoon being a Tanuki, which is a raccoon dog, which is also literally just a dog that looks like a raccoon if we ignore the yokai that transforms its balls into an entire pizza shop and gives you money from its testicle cash register, then we can talk about how Zigzagoon's transformation between Galar and Hoenn is the equivalent of what is happening with real-life raccoons, or what has already happened. It's literally called the raccoon Pokemon after all, so of course we have to compare it to this real-life phenomena with real raccoons. Because in the real world, raccoons are, or rather a good chunk of them, are becoming neophilic, meaning that they are attracted to new things. Meanwhile, most other animals are neophobic, meaning they are afraid of new things. What this does is it prevents an animal from taking unnecessary risks. Stick to the rivers and lakes that you're used to, your normal water and food sources, normal habitat, usual hiding places, so on and so forth. You do that, you survive. Meanwhile, raccoons don't abide by this rule and instead want to wander. They want to inspect new things, explore, so on and so forth. Which, this is a very useful survival trait because it allows them to take risks where others wouldn't, and ultimately they are rewarded for it. Especially as many humans, myself included, kind of just like raccoons. They're adorable. I would love one as a pet. It's entirely legal to do so, depending on where you live. And they're opportunistic omnivores, so they're not hard to deal with, and people end up feeding them, which they probably shouldn't, and causes them to come to their homes a lot. Again, rewarding their neophilic behavior. But overall, this adaptation in raccoons becoming more neophilic has effectively created a subspecies of raccoons that are better adapted towards city life and living around humans, which it's kind of like city mice or city rats if we want a semi-relevant comparison. Galarian Zigzagoon is likely just passing through this area, fighting whatever it can on the way. We'll see more of it and its evolutions in the future, especially as they're noted to be the Star Child of Galar, as the Pokemon that has best adapted to this climate shift in this region. Our last entry for this route is the omnivore corgi known as Yamper. Now, Yamper tends to be drawn to fast-moving things and will chase after people, other Pokemon, and even other vehicles. No brain, head empty, face smiling. This is the life that Yamper lives, and we should appreciate it for this. Yamper has an organ that generates electricity from the base of its tail when it runs. It cannot store the electricity it generates, so sparks of electricity can often be seen when it is running. In this region, it is a popular choice for herding Pokemon such as Wooloo. Due to its gluttonous nature, it will only assist people in exchange for treats, making it a very food-motivated Pokemon. It's just like me, for real. Now, Joltik are also often seen on its butt, feeding on the static electricity that emits from it. Now, according to multiple sources, corgis were amazing and would even herd cattle that other dogs wouldn't even dare to face head-to-head. Being so close to the ground allows them easy access to nip at the ankles while dodging hooves and horns. And all this is exemplified by the Pembroke Welsh Corgi, which herded sheep and is the inspiration for Yamper. Also, it turns out I lied, because there is a special section right across the lake with a few changes, plus some powerful Pokemon, so that wasn't our last Pokemon of this section. We now have Lotad, Seedot, Purloin, Blipbug, Choodle, all hiding away. Then we add in a 35% chance of Gossifleur exclusively hiding in the grass. Gossifleur prefers living in lands with clean water and air. The pollen it produces has a healing effect, and it used to be made into a tea as a common folk remedy given to sick children in the Galar region. They can travel long distances by riding the wind, controlling which direction it goes by twisting its body and its petals. While it travels, it starts to sing a joyous song that is said to charm many people into raising it. Gossifleur can anchor itself to the ground to bask in the sunlight, and when it absorbs enough of it, it blooms brilliantly. It is also noted that cutiefly are drawn in by Gossifleur's pollen. Plain and simple, Gossifleur is a cotton plant absorbing sunlight. It's likely here just because it doesn't have any real threats, can get plenty of sunlight, and can escape real easily if it needs to, as there are no bird Pokemon in this area, meaning it likely avoids Rookity at the very least by being on this side of the water. Onto the water for fishing, we have mostly Magikarp, add in a Choodle, and then we have a 1% chance of fishing up a Phoebus. This little fish is ultimately not all that different from Magikarp in terms of its survivability. The greatest difference, though, is that Phoebus is seen as an incredibly shabby Pokemon within the world's lore. So shabby, in fact, that other Pokemon don't pay attention to it at all. Not even incredibly aggressive Pokemon such as Crawdont. This effectively means that Phoebus can live anywhere, and it won't have any natural predators at all. In addition, Phoebus, I need to stop switching between Phoebus and Feebas. Feebas is noted to be able to live in incredibly murky waters, meaning it can live in lower oxygen environments and likely got here thanks to extreme weather patterns that caused flooding, created streams of water that then carried sediment, which created murky waters and allowed Phoebus to move from place to place through these transient streams that were here. Whether that was willingly or not is an entirely different story that I am not answering today, but you can always check out my Pokemon migration video for more on all of that. Visible Pokemon include Galarian Zigzagoon, now taking up half of the population, so we get to know where the other Zigzagoon came from, a slew of Blipbug, Nickit, and a small population of Yamper. Meanwhile, on top of the water, we'll find not just a high population of Arrokuda, but also its evolution, Barraskewda, taking up over a quarter of the population alongside a 2% chance of running into a Gyarados. Barraskewda's jaws are said to be as sharp as a spear and strong like steel. It propels itself up to speeds of 100 knots, which is 185 kilometers an hour, or 115 miles per hour, by spinning its tail, and uses that speed to ram into its prey, spearing it. This is a 4'3" or 1.3 meter Pokemon that weighs about 66 pounds or 30 kilograms. This is nowhere near a real underwater missile, but good luck surviving a spear the size of a large dog traveling faster than a car on the highway. I feel like this thing hitting a Pokemon or human would be the equivalent of shooting a mouse with a revolver, which was something that was set up as a patented American mousetrap forever ago. Do you know what would happen in those scenarios? I can't show you because I would get demonetized, but I can tell you that the creature gets turned into a cartoonish bloody mist. It is gone. And Barraskewda is a menace to anything it then decides to attack, which is even more terrifying when you realize they're able to leap out of the water and catch Wingull flying near the surface with its jaws. It is also known to compete with Finizen for food, which is surprising since Finizen is one of those heroic Pokemon but still eats other Pokemon. It's a dolphin, likely eats fish. I guess the hero part doesn't actually kick in until Palafin, but it would be dark and kind of cool to have this heroic figure that just kind of attacks others for food still and gets paid in like crabs or something. Like, here's our sacrifice, thank you for keeping the town safe, like a evil mobster, cannibalistic mobster. Lastly, though, it is noted that the flesh of Barraskewda is surprisingly tasty. Oh, thank Arceus. Everything is forgiven for Arceus creating this abomination that is actually kind of cool, but is a threat to everything that exists or goes near the water. Totally makes up for it being living ammunition. Lastly, of course, there is the terror that is Gyarados, an ecological reset button of the world that carves away faces of rock with its body, destroys the landscape, floods the area, and doesn't stop its rampage until everything is destroyed, if it goes on a rampage. It is effectively the rare natural wildfire that replenishes the soil, except Gyarados moves Pokemon around and prevents overpopulation. So it's pretty vital, especially if some Pokemon really are overly aggressive in their survival and would eventually completely take over the area. They might even be the reason, in other areas, why Feebas got moved here. Now, there are 3 wandering Pokemon, but it turns out that they only appear once and do not respawn at all, meaning they aren't a normal part of the ecology here. And don't worry, these Pokemon that I'm skipping over do appear in later routes as regular encounters, so we won't be missing out on them. Plus, there are some wanderers like this who regularly respawn in specific conditions or specific areas, so I won't be ignoring all the wandering encounters, don't worry. On to Route 3, we begin with the hidden encounters, seeing Rookity as the only repeat Pokemon. And this route is a little different because it connects to the Galar mines, which then influences the Pokemon we find here because of the workers who pair with Pokemon in the area or bring Pokemon to help them work, attracting more Pokemon similar to them. This is absolutely the case for Pokemon such as Machop, who has been shown to work alongside humans in the games since as early as Generation 1. Working in the mines is also a great place to train up, and Machop, amongst many other fighting-type Pokemon, are not hunting other Pokemon. In fact, they aren't even really eating meat. They're eating their fill of berries, nuts, vegetables, legumes, and more. And to clarify, there are definitely fighting-type Pokemon out there that do eat other Pokemon that we will talk about later, but Machop is not one of them. To follow, we have Mudbray, who does help out humans by carrying loads of over 50 times its own weight as a beast of burden. But this might not have always been the case in Galar, because apparently they were nearly hunted to extinction all over the world and was believed to have only run wild in Alola for a time. And why would they be hunted to extinction? Well, nearly 242.5 pounds or 110 kilograms of meat kind of speaks for itself in a crisis. And if you evolve it into Mudsdale, that's 2,028.3 pounds or 920 kilograms of beast right there. It sounds terrible, but I imagine the logic was something like evolve it, work it like a horse, like it is, and then eat it. Which, I mean, not a bad plan, honestly speaking. You gotta do what you gotta do to survive, especially after the darkest day and everything horrible ended up happening afterwards. Food sources likely became scarce, as we've talked about. Also, 50 times its own weight would then mean that Mudbray can carry 12,125 pounds or 46,000 kilograms. Putting that into perspective, it could carry 3.5 2014 Ford Tauruses. Ignore how specific that is, and the fact that I might have had one of those cars at one point. Mudbray, though, is here because of all the exposed dirt and material being dumped out of the mines, making it a perfect place for it to get its meal on, as their diet consists of eating dirt, as they then create mud and then covers itself in the mud that never dries out. And theoretically speaking, Mudbray shouldn't have any Pokemon that would dare to mess with it here, but there are, or might be, some in the future that it'll have to worry about. Another Pokemon attracted to this area because of the mines, but not coming from inside the mines, is Klink. It's strange that while they typically live within the caves, or within caves in general, they don't live in this mine. Likely because it isn't a natural cave that was then turned into a mine, and any magnetic material they would be attracted to is no longer here. So they might be wandering here for whatever scraps might still exist, as they also use this as a way to connect with each other. Connecting with one another is very important for Klink because they generate their life energy by spinning. So if they stop spinning, they simply eventually will pass away. They really aren't anything more than a Pokemon making their way through the area, but there's always a chance that they may be kept out of the mines by humans or more aggressive Pokemon. To follow, a larger, more visible population of Zigzagoon in the area makes up for over a third of the visible encounters, which may have then attracted Pancham here, who in turn makes up nearly a quarter of the hidden encounters. Pancham emulate the habits of other Pokemon that they look up to. So in place of a Pangoro, they of course might look up to other Dark-type Pokemon, such as Shiftry, as we see within Pokemon Snap, or the Galarian Zigzagoon as we see here on this route. And since we also know that Pangoro is an omnivore, matching up with real-life pandas, we could easily say that Pancham would not only be the same, but might even be more omnivorous than your typical Pancham might be, as it follows not only the goading tactics that the Zigzagoon here have, but also the diet that they have. And as we go along, it might seem like there are a lot of predators or Pokemon that might target each other without there being evolution, and it might be because of two reasons. One is because the Pokemon are in a free-for-all, especially when we get into the visible encounters. All of them keeping each other in check, not putting too much pressure on one or the other. But we'll get to that later. Instead, we'll continue with our hidden encounters like Sizzlipede. Sizzlipede uses its coils to wrap around the prey before using its heated body to cook it. It, much like its evolved form, Centiskorch, can generate heat using the flammable gas stored within its body. Once the prey is cooked to well done, it will voraciously nibble at them piece by piece until the last morsel. That is arguably one of the, if not the most horrifying ways to die in my personal opinion. Having a fear of centipedes, this is a fire centipede that wraps itself around me and cooks me alive until I am past well done and into congratulations as the steak that I am. A true nightmare scenario. It is also said, though, that Sizzlipede is related to Scorpy, with the two sharing a common ancestor. It is also a similar species to Venipede, but often gets into fights with it whenever the two do meet. So, in that logic, Sizzlipede is in the Bug Egg group, Scorpy is in the Water 3 and Bug Egg group, and Venipede is also purely in the Bug Egg group. What this would then mean is that Scorpy and Sizzlipede have a common ancestor in the Water 3 and Bug Egg group, and with them being arthropods, their ancestor may have been Anorith, which is an Anomalocaris which belongs to an extinct genus of Radiodons, which was a group that diverged from arthropods, which kind of puts things backwards. The hard part is that there should have been a creature before Anorith, but Anorith existed before not only land arthropods existed, but also before Jaws even existed. So unless I'm missing something, this is the furthest back common ancestor that would be currently possible with the info we have from Pokemon, especially considering, once again, for clarity, that this creature, or the Anomalocaris, would have occurred before the land arthropods that these Pokemon are. I will note, though, there is one other possibility, which is if we say that Kabuto is the common ancestor instead. Because while it isn't in the Bug Egg group, it is in the Water 3 and Water 1 egg groups, while still being the oldest arthropod in the history of Pokemon. Maybe a special project that will be in the future, will have to start soon, using egg groups as the basis for the Pokemon Tree of Life. Hint, hint. Keep your eyes out for a special announcement sometime soon. Once again, we find ourselves with a Pokemon, though, that will eat anything and everything that is made of meat in Sizzlipede. Luckily, it isn't common in this area, as it comes in at a whopping 1% chance of appearing, and is still hidden in the grass from all the other Pokemon that would try to eat it, which would, once again, likely be Rookity and two other Fire-type Pokemon we'll talk about very soon. Before we get to them, though, we have Squavit at 80% and Cherubi at 20% sitting in the berry trees. Unfortunately for Cherubi, not only does it look like just a berry itself, but its second head is packed so full of nutrients that are vital for Cherubi to evolve. And that second head is often sought after by bird Pokemon, and I would be willing to bet Squavit as well, since it is apparently not only super healthy because of all the nutrients, but it is also incredibly sweet and tasty. Kind of makes me think of bear berries or high bush cranberry, which are both supposed to be packed full of nutrients and sweet to animals, and are very important for animals preparing for winter, but those berries, to me, taste absolutely awful, and yes, I do speak from experience, at least in regards to the high bush cranberry. I ate that thing in front of my entire college class, and learned my lesson really fast, but somebody had to do it. Cherubi is just doing its best to stay hidden in the trees and avoid the eyes of all other Pokemon that are in the area. Honestly, not a bad idea, since Rookity and maybe Squavit are the only real threats without seeing any other bird Pokemon in this area. And even then, Rookity is more focused on bug Pokemon than anything else. Moving on to our visible encounters, making up nearly a collective third of the population are Vulpix and Growlithe. Those two fire types I teased about earlier. Both are omnivorous Pokemon, since one is a fox and the other is a dog. And I do say Growlithe is more specifically a dog and not so much a wolf, who would then eat more meat like what we would see with Hisuian Growlithe in the past. Which this then ties into why they are out here. not just because they're used to being around humans, but because the colder climate helps them regulate their body temperatures better. We can at least confirm this directly with Vulpix, since it states that if it gets too hot outside and it gets too warm, it'll just start letting out belts of fire to regulate its temperature. Meanwhile, with Growlithe, we once again compare it to its thicker-coated Hisuian form, which it lost over the many years as the climate shifted from the harsher, colder weather that existed during that time period in Hisui within Sinnoh to the modern day, meaning we can assume the colder weather is pretty good for Growlithe as well. Down the line, despite existing since Generation 2, we have Tyrogue appearing for the first time in the Ecology series with a very low 2% chance, but still appearing naturally again for the first time. All other times we've gotten it from an egg, found it in post-game with the Pokeradar or something similar that influences its encounter rate and is not a natural proper encounter. Now, Tyrogue is famous for its eagerness to compete and boundless energy, to such an extent that it will challenge anyone, even larger foes. Determined to make itself stronger, it will not quit no matter how many times it loses, and while it is small, Tyrogue should not be ignored as it can slug a target without warning. I just love the fact that this child with the ability to turn my bones into dust would be so excited that it might just kill me by accident with a punch. Though, as a result, it is always nursing its injuries from fighting opponents larger than itself. As Tyrogue becomes stressed if it is not able to train every day, its trainer must maintain a regular training schedule. And it is usually found in urban areas, with the training that it does complete influencing its evolution into either Hitmonlee, Hitmonchan, or Hitmontop. And to be entirely fair, we are right by the Galar mines and Motostoke, a good in-between for Tyrogue to train and then go back to the city for food from the people it helps or gets along with. And once again, Tyrogue is going to be a Pokemon that doesn't hunt other Pokemon. Lots of beans and fatty berries for this little guy. And it has plenty of targets to train up against, like Zigzagoon, who is constantly goading it and other Pokemon for a battle. Up next at a 10% chance is Stunky, who is a skunk in every single way. If a skunk can do it, Stunky can do it. The only difference is that while a skunk's stench might last longer, a week or two roughly, maybe longer, Stunky's only lasts for 24 hours, but may cause memory loss in the target, which is arguably the wildest adaptation in Pokemon bar none. Because normally, getting sprayed means the offender would learn their lesson, they would stay away, or find a way around this spray. Meanwhile, with Stunky, it effectively means that the target will always forget that Stunky can even spray them in the first place. This means that it can constantly use this adaptation on repeat on the same target without ever having to worry, assuming they continually lose their memory. Now, they will be getting their fill of insects, small animals, fruits, and plants, meaning that it will likely not only be chasing down Pokemon such as Sizzlipede or Cherubi, but it might also find an interest in whatever is inside our next Pokemon, Trubbish. They might come in at a low 5%, but they are definitely a bit representative of Mind Tailings, especially as they are paired as a 1% chance to the 99% chance of encountering Roly-Coly in the western part of this section that we'll get to soon enough. Now, Trubbish are created by a mixture of domestic and industrial waste that underwent a chemical reaction. And once again, we're at a mine, so this makes perfect sense. Their gases that they belch are toxic, which might even be a reference to the toxic gas within coal mines known as carbon monoxide, amongst other many dangerous gases, such as the explosive methane. And to explain all of this a little bit better, mine tailings are effectively all the material left behind after the valuable minerals have been removed from the area. These are fine-grained pieces left behind and can be very easily spread into water supplies and has hurt a lot of people, especially Native Americans within the United States, due to the government not knowing at first and then not caring as time went on. This goes for more than just coal, but also other metals and even radioactive material, so you can just imagine how horrifying the damage that this causes is. Though, back to Trubbish, back into our escape world, back into our fantasy world, at least if it's happy and comfortable, Trubbish stops smelling. Unfortunately, it will eventually evolve into Garbodor if it, I assume, eats too much, as it will then burst open as we see visually. I'll also note that even though we don't see it here, the fumes let off by this Pokemon is relished by Galarian Weezing, who we will see later on a different route. There are also Gossifleur floating about, as they make up nearly a third of the encounters here, once again, mostly unbothered by the other Pokemon here, as it isn't a primary target and can escape pretty easily. Moving on, in that last western field, we have the Trubbish and Roly-Poly population like I just stated. Roly-Poly was first discovered around 400 years ago in coal mines. It races around on grassy plains and the rough, rocky terrain in coal mines and caves, burning through the coal that sustains it. Its diet also includes grass that gets tangled in its leg, which I completely missed that, I'm pretty sure, when I went through the complete Pokemon food chain. So that makes it more than just a chemotroph or a chemotroph, since it eats coal. It's an herbivore as well. And I guess since it's biological matter, it's like grass, I guess technically you could say that it's still eating coal before it was made into coal, like many years before it's made into coal, I suppose. Brother is out here eating pre-coal a couple 100 million years early. Now, until about 100 years ago, every household in Galar had a Roly-Poly, using the coal that it drops for cooking and heating up homes. Its popularity continues even to the modern day, as it is used for outdoor activities. Now, that's really interesting to me, because this would then mean that it is not only eating coal, but is also producing coal potentially, or at least that's what it sounds like to me. And if that's the case, then what it might be doing is eating the sulfur that's found in the coal and then discarding the rest. If that's the case, then it would make coal a much safer fuel source, even if it isn't necessarily that much cleaner, just because you still have to deal with coal dust. And in fact, I actually went to a high school where there was a coal factory nearby, and it would leave particles all over everyone's cars, and I didn't have a car for the longest time, so it didn't affect me, and I hardly had to see it or deal with it, but I had to dig into it for research back in like my last 2 years of high school. Wow, that makes me feel old. And I did not think I would ever be bringing that up in anything in like the year 2026. Dwebble, though, is noted to be Roly-Poly's natural enemy, as the former tends to think that Roly-Poly is an inanimate rock to turn into a home, which is pretty horrifying when you think about it. A creature not attacking you because you're a meal, because it needs to survive by eating you, but simply using acid to try and core out your body to live in because it thinks you're just another rock. Your life isn't even recognized by your enemy by those standards. Though, ultimately, I don't think Roly-Poly has anything to worry about here, and instead might just get into small quarrels with Machop and Tyrogue whenever they want to train against it or take coal that it wants, or at least when they're not training against each other. As with enough Growlithe, Vulpix, Stunky, Zigzagoon, Sizzlipede, and maybe even Pancham attacks, there is one Pokemon that becomes a staple meal for every single one of these Pokemon. Rookidee, who has the highest population in hiding in this area, has received enough pressure from the Pokemon around it to become Corvisquire. It is noted that there is a single one sitting safely away from the commotion near a fence and will consistently respawn in the area. Corvisquire's brain is large relative to those of other bird Pokemon, which is thought to be the reason behind its high intelligence level. They are intelligent enough to use tools in battle, having been seen to throw rocks at their opponents or use vines to entangle them. Over the course of many tough battles, they learn to assess the strength of prospective opponents before engaging them, and they are noted to prey upon Steenie, who aren't in this area. That last part, though, is just because Steenie have really tough bodies. In fact, their entire line has really tough bodies, and so you need a really tough beak to be able to break into those fruity bodies that they have. And I just still genuinely love this line. It's partially because I really love Corvids in general. Crows, ravens, and then non-Corvids, like the Great Patu, the black great-eared nightjar, penguins, puffins, and the long-tailed widowbird. All of those are my favorite birds that exist in our world. That last one is what Yveltal is likely based on, and I had my artist, Muse Artworld, use as an inspiration to change how the personal Togekiss I have on my intro or outro screens look. All that aside, I feel like people mostly know how intelligent corvids are at this point, but for those of you that don't, allow me to share with you one tidbit of amazing information. They have been shown to understand water displacement within multiple experiments. They may not fully understand the complete reasoning or the physics behind it, but their intelligence allows them to understand the concept of it and put it into practice in order to raise water and get food floating out of their reach, something that children don't learn until later on in school. I might just need a video on the birds of the Pokemon world, and then the cats, and then maybe another dog one. I think you see where this is going. I love animals. To add to this, ravens eat pretty much anything. Directly from the Smithsonian, they state, in the wild, ravens are opportunistic feeders, and their diet varies based on habitat and available food sources. They are omnivorous, and will feed on everything from small mammals to nesting birds, eggs, and berries. They will also eat carrion, scavenge from other predators, and even from human landfills. A group, or a flock of ravens, will raid seabird colonies, consuming the eggs and young of these colonies. Ravens cache their food and hide it from other animals, including each other. So what does this mean? It means that while Rookity has matured into a more intelligent Pokemon, that intelligence is being weaponized as a tool to eat its fill of food, and everyone is on the buffet table. I would say everyone except Mudbray. Still though, predators still have to pick and choose what's worth their time, and when you pick something that takes too much energy or puts you at risk of death when you try to fight it and eat it, it just isn't worth it. And just because Mudbray is a ground type, it doesn't mean that it won't use its immense strength to absolutely drag Corvisquire to the ground and crush it like a pancake. While they aren't a naturally created place, I think it's important to dig into the Galar mines. Pun was not intended when I first wrote that, but I'm leaving that in. Now, of course, Roly-Coly makes up over a third of the encounters here, with all encounters being visible encounters. But then both Roggenrola and Timber make upwards of a quarter of the population depending on whether you are playing Sword or Shield. Roggenrola is born deep underground and was discovered about 100 years ago in an earthquake fissure in a layer of exposed rock. Its steel-hard body is made up of dirt from many centuries ago, and it compares its hard physique with those of Geodude and Carbink. However, a sufficiently long soak in water will cause its body to soften to some degree. Me too, Roggenrola. Me too. Inside of Roggenrola lies an energy core, making its body somewhat warm to the touch. Its ear, which is that big hole in the front of its face, leads straight to its energy core, causing it to become angry if someone sticks their hand in there, which I'd be pretty angry too if someone just shoved their hand inside of my head. Now, that ear is incredibly important because it listens for the drips of water within caves so it can get a little bit of water at a time, drinking it in and burning it up. It then creates crystals. Those crystals will eventually show as it evolves into Boldore and Gigalith, much like what we would see with stalagmites. And as long as there isn't a Pokemon looking to eat any rocks, Roggenrola has nothing to worry about. Meanwhile, with Timber, it's effectively another Machop as it loves to help construction workers. I would technically chalk this one up as an unnatural encounter, but we also can't catch Pokemon that belongs to other people, and we can catch these guys, so this becomes a real gray area. Just know that it is not eating other Pokemon and just wants to help out in the mines. Up next is Drillbur, who I always have to double check the information of because real moles don't eat vegetables, but it seems to be implied that Drillbur and Excadrill do. Or, at the absolute least, with it being in the mines, it separates itself from us immediately knowing where the bug Pokemon are and just serves as a danger to those inside the mines deeper underground. Because while yes, it may be used as a drill to help create the mines, a wild Drillbur is known to be a bit of a threat to the integrity of the mineshaft construction and might cause everything to come tumbling down on every man and Pokemon within the place, which is a pretty scary thought. The good news though is that their population is pretty low overall, and we're slowly seeing that most of the Pokemon then in these mines aren't really going to bother each other, let alone actually attack each other. Moving on, we get equal amounts of Diglett to Drillbur, and this is likely because the mines might remind Diglett of the tunnels dug by Onix, which there are Onix in Galar, but not here. Diglett are feeding on tree roots and vegetables, which are likely dug up by not only the people in the mines, but also all the Pokemon moving around in the mines, especially if Drillbur leaves anything behind. Now, Diglett are super vital to any ecosystem as well, since they till up the soil, leave droppings behind, and will ultimately allow this mine to become a proper cave once it's been abandoned. Speaking of mines being abandoned and Pokemon taking over, we do get to see Woobat here. They're nice and simple, eating bug Pokemon and leaving heart-shaped marks on walls wherever they rest. And why I say they're taking over is because they're not going to be around a lot of loud construction. And since there are no bugs here, then they're more than likely venturing out of this cave to get their fill of food like you would expect any other bat to do, and coming back here to make it their home. No real threats to them once more, as this again is just another home for them. Finally, we do get to see another evolution, not from pressure, but likely from an environment that has fed into Roly-Coly, allowing an abundance of food for it and causing it to evolve into Carkol. Carkol forms coal and coal tar inside of its body. Although it frequently drops its coal, the heap on Carkol's back never falls apart completely, even when it travels at high speeds, due to the tar binding it together. People in the Galar region once used Carkol's coal to fuel their lives. That's almost a tongue twister right there. Carkol's coal. How much coal could a Carkol coal if a coal? You'll figure it out in the comments. They can move faster than 18 miles per hour, 30 kilometers an hour, and can breathe flames hotter than 1800 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 1000 degrees Celsius. When Carkol experiences strong emotions, the temperature inside its body increases. And according to Professor Freed's Pokemon Seminar, the supply of coal that Carkol produces is infinite, which then confirms info that I was questioning earlier with Roly-Coly and shows exactly why they were so vital to humanity so long ago, especially when we talk about its evolution and Gigantamax. No big surprises here since it isn't a true natural ecosystem, but at least it tells us exactly how it'll begin and continue changing into something more natural in the future and how it affects the natural life in the area. Onward to Route 4, we are slammed once again with another slew of Pokemon we have not talked about. Our repeat encounters are a pair of Diglett that wander around, Wooloo coming in at a quarter of the time as a hidden encounter this time, Squavit in the trees, Magikarp and Choodle in the water, and a 20% chance of seeing Yamper wandering around. Beginning with the hidden encounters, there are some very low chances of seeing Budew and Ferroseed, who are mostly sticking to themselves and avoiding any level of attention. Budew is absorbing water, and the cleaner it is, the more poisonous its pollen will be. Meanwhile, Ferroseed is digging up moss it can find in order to satiate its appetite and maybe going into those mines. Even though we don't encounter it there, it could still be going in there briefly to get its fill. In fact, the other Pokemon appearing in low amounts might be helping Budew's skittish self, as we get to see Cutiefly, a very active and vital pollinator within the world of Pokemon. They are arguably the most efficient pollinators, as they have an additional sense that allows them to see when a flower is about to bloom, though this is often mixed up with people who have strong positive emotions and they might accidentally stab them with their little needle nose. They're also likely, proboscis is what it's called, what happened to me there? They're also likely trying to track down Gossifleur, as they are heavily drawn in by their pollen, which would explain why they are a single route away from each other. What might seem strange at first is also finding Milcery here, a Pokemon that is very sweet in taste to other Pokemon, while it is also a Pokemon that absorbs sweet aromas as its primary diet. This can be easily explained by Turffield being so close by, a place with many terraced farming fields that would give off plenty of fresh smells for Milcery to absorb into its body. Moving on, up next in the water, we get Goldeen, who has a 10% chance of popping up and is a bit aggressive. It might eat Magikarp, attacking them, eating the scraps that it rips off of them, but the Choodle are also here snapping away at the aggressive little fancy fish. Not much to say about them in this region that I haven't said in previous installments, so we're going to quickly move on. Back in the hidden grass encounters, as hiding away, is Joltik, who we already know is trying to jump onto the backs of Yamper so they can get their fill of electricity. Without that source of electricity, little Joltik won't even be able to move, and that isn't even its fuel source, so it needs plenty of help from Galvantula, who we don't even get to currently see. So it has to get all the electricity it can so it can move, and then it can try and get food or return home. What this otherwise might mean, though, is that Joltik are literally riding on Yamper across long distances to save energy and not just taking up electricity from their little cute heart-shaped butts. The last hidden encounter that makes up a third of the population and is nearly a quarter of the visible encounters is Galarian Meowth. Its unkempt beard signifies its adaptation to survive in cold climates. Its coin is now black and extremely hard, with the darkest and hardest coins being especially valued and respected amongst its species. Its body has partially turned to iron as a result of many years of living with a race of savage seafarers, which is the Pokemon's way of saying Vikings are real, just like they did in the anime. As a result of many battles, Galarian Meowth develops the ability to evolve into Berserker instead of Persian. Kantonian Meowth and Galarian Meowth don't get along, and Galarian Meowth is known for fighting fearlessly against foes using its steel claws. I would be surprised to find out the Galarian and Alolan versions get along by, them not saying anything about their relation, though they just might, because Galarian Meowth is the no thoughts, head empty bruiser with wide eyes, while the Alolan one still sees itself as royalty. And of course, since this is a cat, we can say it is an obligate carnivore, making everything made of meat on this route a target, which effectively means we have the goon and then the boss between Alolan and Galarian Meowths. And of course, since this is a cat, we could say it is an obligate carnivore, making everything made of meat on this route its target. And even if Pokemon like Badoo are plants, it might still swipe at them for fun from time to time. It might more specifically, though, be hunting down Pikachu and Eevee who are in this area, who, simply put, Pikachu are out here roasting berries for food, and Eevee are omnivores since most of their evolutions are also omnivores, and they often teach each other and protect each other. They're only here as a rare encounter. Meanwhile, there's another threat that would potentially explain why Meowth might be in hiding from time to time, not just because it's hunting and stalking its prey, but because it could be getting hunted down by an Electrike. These Pokemon are effectively wild wolves. They are unlike any other dog Pokemon and are pretty much the wildest and least domesticated of the bunch, from what I can tell, visibly and physically speaking. And because of this, their diets are definitely going to lean more towards the carnivorous side of things. This would even explain why Wooloo is in hiding here for the first time, rather than being out in the open, because there is a wolf hunting our sheep. And this wouldn't be the first time that it has hunted sheep, because there's a small hint to it with its ability, Minus. Whereas when it appears in other regions, it will be near Mareep, who have the plus ability. Such a simple but beautiful way to subtly tell us that information, that relationship between them. The last Pokemon on this route is a Pokemon going after everyone and everything with a pulse as it hypnotizes and lures them into the shadowy grass, and that is Pumpkaboo in all of their sizes. These shadowy cats that inhabit pumpkins literally just do exactly like I said, hypnotize their prey and take them away. Though who they attack all depends on their size, with each size correlating to the size of prey they want to go after. And there are supersized Pumpkaboo here as a 1% chance encounter, so they may even take a human or two in their hunting sessions. Okay, we're on to Route 5, and while I love the diversity, this is why I knew Galar would be a trip and a half to get through, because 80% of this route is nothing but new Pokemon again. Starting with hidden encounters, we have Lombre, who we already discussed is competing with birds for food, though they are also able to stay out of the water a little bit longer without any issues. In addition, they are a bit mischievous overall in regards to human fishermen, but we have to start asking, why did they evolve? Well, not only are there Magikarp, Goldeen, and Choodle in the water, but hidden in the grass are Dewpider in small amounts. These Pokemon wander onto the land with bubbles on their head so they can continue to breathe, as they can only absorb oxygen dissolved in water. And with them being spiders, and of course arachnids eating habits, its evolution, we know they're opportunistic predators. To follow, we do have another evolution in Nuzleaf, who may have actually evolved not because of predators, but because this is a good place for it to exist. Good nutrients and plenty of water, especially with Holbury being so close by, the water gym city effectively, and it is a port city. Their diets really haven't changed, but they make up nearly a quarter of the hidden population here. There's nothing for it to really hide from, honestly, so it's just lounging around, staying out of trouble, and absorbing that good sunlight. Surprisingly, there is a rare chance to run into Nincada, which it was hard to fully confirm, but apparently cicada nymphs, which Nincada is based on, do like moist, aerated soil. Once again, explaining why they are here as we are close to the seaport city of Holbury. They're also hidden because they stay pretty still while feeding on roots of trees, absorbing moisture and nutrients while building underground nests. Esper is up next, which is a cat that is then, once again, an obligate carnivore, but with it being such a timid little creature that is learning to control its psychic powers, it's a little difficult to determine what it is specifically hunting, though there are a few that we could suspect, such as Spritzy, who is both a hidden and visible encounter, while also effectively being a bird-like creature. Nothing too crazy to say about Spritzy either, as just like Milcery, Spritzy is attracted to strong aromatics. The difference, though, is that Spritzy will eat the things that smell good to it, while also then naturally emitting perfumes of its own that depend on its diet. So effectively, if they ate a bunch of lavender, they would start smelling like lavender. Often paired in areas with Spritzy and Milcery, we have Swirlix, who depend upon eating sweet foods for their diet of what is effectively pure sugar. There is a berry tree in this area, which then easily explains why Swirlix is here. But with all the farmlands nearby, it also gives Swirlix plenty to choose from. Yet another evolution we find here is Dottler. It barely moves, but it's still alive. Hiding in its shell without food or water seems to have awakened its psychic powers. As it grows inside its shell, it uses its psychic abilities to monitor the outside world and prepare for its evolution. While it doesn't look like it, this is still the pupating stage, just like what we would see in Kakuna and Metapod. We confirm this by knowing the following. The shell is so heavy, it prevents Dottler from getting food to eat and water to drink, leaving very small holes to breathe through only. It's observing everything closely, staying safe until the day that it can evolve as it hides away in the grass, which this might actually finally show us that this area is a route that has very few to no threats on it whatsoever. That isn't to say there are zero, as Esper has got to eat, plus one other very Pokemon that we will find here, we will find to be very dangerous soon enough. But as we move along to that berry tree that I mentioned, we find that one of those berries are not what we think it is. Instead, we will watch it raise two eyes at us, grow a tail out of its backside, and we have before us an Appletun, who is both the lightest and shortest Dragon-type Pokemon currently, and also one of the shortest Grass-type Pokemon. As soon as it is born, it burrows into an apple that looks like a Leppa berry, which serves as a home, food source, and protection against preying bird Pokemon. The apple is prevented from rotting thanks to Appletun's body fluid, which also strengthens the fruit's rind. If it runs out of apples to eat or it is separated from its apple, its body will lose moisture and it will become dehydrated and weak. Since Appletun hides inside an apple, it is sometimes mistaken by the frugivorous Noibat for food. In Galar, it is a custom to give an Appletun as a romantic gesture, which is a pun on, you being the apple of my eye. Now, the flavor of the apple Appletun lives in determines its evolution. The apples can be exceptionally tart, sweet, or syrupy. The exact reason for its evolutions and why it can preserve the apple is because the fluid it lets out of its body is acidic, which is also antibacterial and great at preserving things. This is why the apple breaks apart when you give it a tart apple, which is sour and more acidic, which causes it to evolve into Flapple. It becomes an apple pie with the sweet apple, as you use tart apples in an apple pie, but it's already tart, so you have to add something sweet to it. And then, the syrupy apple allows more Appletun worms to take residence without having to worry about breaking down the apple itself and them losing their home. The only Pokemon Appletun might have to worry about is Squavit, as, it might unintentionally evict Appletun from its home in order to stuff its face with yet another berry. Moving on to the visible encounters, while Spritzy and Swirlix make up roughly 30% of the population in their respective games, Stuffle takes up a bit more than that and is a bit of a threat. At the end of the day, Stuffle, while very cute, is still a bear, and an incredibly powerful one at that. It will be as omnivorous as any other bear, and has the ability to break tree trunks just by flailing around aimlessly, being strong enough to even break through walls of steel. Honestly speaking, Stuffle really only has one or two Pokemon that it has to contend with, and one of them isn't even going to try to eat it, which would be Wobbuffet. I would not be surprised to find out that Wobbuffet is here just because Stuffle accidentally smacked around a Why Not too many times. Only Why Not is noted to eat sweet fruits, and these Pokemon never attack first, so Wobbuffet is likely casually enjoying the scenery while randomly getting bopped by Pokemon in the area, only to clap back with its entire punching bag shaped body and eating fruit every once in a while. And if it ever feels like I'm going faster for older gen Pokemon during this, it's because, again, I've talked about them plenty in previous installments of the Ecology series and just really don't want to waste too much time here. All this flailing, though, from Stuffle and the many berries that would appear here for the Pokemon that are attracted to them, also likely attracted the Minccino that we see here. They are obsessed with cleaning, and when you have a little bear that mindlessly rolls around and destroys everything in the area around it, splintering trees, smashing rocks, throwing around berries, whatever it is, you can pretty easily imagine why the area would need some pretty good cleanup, which is fine. Minccino likes cleaning and will wash itself in spring water to keep itself clean. The area being so clean may be another reason why we get Spritzy attracted to the area, simply because of the fresh and clean smells that it would be picking up on. Our last two regularly encountered Pokemon only have a 5% chance of being seen walking around, though walking is definitely not the right term to use when talking about Drifloon. They're supposed to be more commonly seen at night as well. Now, at first this was very confusing until I found out that Drifloon will accidentally take and cuddle plush toys from wherever it visits, thinking that the plush toy is a child. And what that would then mean is that Drifloon might be grabbing a few Stuffle from time to time. Thank you, Pokemon Sleep, for that information and the very cute image that they supplied. I know it came out like years after Galar did, but it's still relevant information and may have been something that was thought about for a long time before being made official, or maybe it was seen in the anime and I missed it. Our last entry for this route is Galarian Farfetch'd. The leek it carries with its wings is much larger in Galar than the leeks that Farfetch'd use in other regions, although whether it is related to the large leek used as a curry ingredient is unknown in lore. Galarian Farfetch'd's body has developed a much stronger frame that gives it the strength required to carry its leek. However, this sheer mass makes it hard for it to fly. It is renowned for its courage in battle and can use its leek like swords or javelins. You know, I kind of wonder if anyone's ever made the mistake of giving a full-on spear and a shield to it, which I guess wouldn't make that much of a difference since its evolution literally does just have a spear and a shield, or javelin rather. Galarian Farfetch'd is known to bet everything on a single destructive blow to defeat its opponents. As a result of surviving and experiencing many different battles, it develops the ability to evolve into Sirfetch'd. And while it doesn't directly state it here, the original Farfetch'd is noted to only eat its spring onion, so we might be able to assume something similar for Galarian Farfetch'd, but it might not be able to say that regarding its evolution. Now, I will at least note that Eldegoss does float its way through here, but it only spawns here once and appears more commonly on other areas, so we will not talk about it right now. Route 6 is a desert-like area with high cliffs, sand, and a singular lake. It's also effectively one big ancient dig site while having some very red soil, which would mean that it is likely full of iron. Hidden away, we have nothing but new Pokemon if we exclude the Goldeen and Magikarp that we have to fish for. The only other watery friend waiting to snap onto prey is Dreadnought. Its sharp, jagged fangs are powerful enough to chomp on rock, iron, and steel rods. It captures prey and fights opponents by chomping down on them as you would expect, and it can extend its neck very quickly to reach enemies that are further away. Due to its well-developed muscles, it can move very fast despite its heavy shell. They are notoriously vicious to the point where it requires a skilled trainer to fully tame and handle it. Some trainers will release Dreadnought into the wild once they find they are unable to handle it, which is pretty terrible. Pretty horrible, even, considering that it effectively turns Dreadnought into an invasive species if that is done often enough or put into the wrong environments. At the very least, it could greatly affect ecosystems in which they are released into and cause harm to even Dreadnought itself. They're also known to lurk along shorelines, biting on prey that approach its dwelling in search of drinking water. It's like a crocodile, and once we get through all the Pokemon on the land, you'll quickly understand why there are no Choodle here. It has effectively evolved just so that way it has the chance to catch some food. Otherwise, it would not match up to the competition and foes that are found on this route, let alone be able to make any of them its personal prey. The only Pokemon in the trees, likely because it leaves no food for any other Pokemon to enjoy, is Greedent. True to its name, Greedent is extremely greedy and gluttonous. It constantly gathers berries and stuffs them into its tail. It will then run to gather berries even if it's in the middle of battle. Just, God, Greedent is the person to call a timeout in the middle of an intense moment just to go get a snack. Just ruin the tension. It stuffs its tail with so many berries that they fall out constantly, especially when it is hit or it faints. It may also stash Bounsweet in its tail, as it considers the latter's sweet scent to be attractive to it. Dim-witted, I didn't say it, Pokemon did, Greedent will not often notice the loss of food they store. Its sharp teeth are strong enough to gnaw through the strongest of berry shells. Now, the bug Pokemon around these parts are really lucky they don't have to worry much about Greedent since it focuses purely on berries. Otherwise, it might become a monster that would decimate the insect population. Speaking of bug Pokemon though, we do get Durant and its counterpart Heatmor, Pokemon that have co-evolved as Durant gained a steely body and Heatmor gained stronger fire, capable of letting it melt down Durant for a meal. They are by far the easiest duo in Ecology because Durant just acts like a giant ant but only eats leaves, while Heatmor exclusively eats Durant. Of course, their real-life counterparts eat far more, but that isn't the case here, and every other Pokemon is going to leave them alone, with one exception we'll talk about later. To follow, there's Torkoal, which is a bit strange to find here specifically, but it is a low chance of seeing it at 5% as a hidden encounter. I say it's only strange because Torkoal exclusively eats coal, which we don't directly find here. And I say that because this is a fossil dig site, which could then mean that there is a chance that with enough digging and overall excavating, some coal may have been dug up and would allow a few Torkoal to live here and get an easy meal, all while not having much to worry about in terms of predators. Also, it would depend on what fossils are being dug up, so on and so forth, and how deep into the layers they actually go. Honestly, the only plausible predators in this area would be Dreadnought, in addition to Duskull and maybe Scorpy, who are both in this area if the Scorpy gets the jump on Torkoal. Now, Duskull isn't even really targeting Pokemon all that much. It primarily focuses on stealing life energy from children, which I have learned recently is not that big of a deal. It's the equivalent of stamina, not your literal soul energy. It's something that refills over time just by existing, eating, drinking, resting, so on and so forth. It is coming in at an 18% encounter rate, and on the previous route is where we would find the daycare, which means that there's a decent chance the Duskull are making their way through this area and making it to the daycare by nighttime to get their fill of baby soul energy. Meanwhile, Scorpy is one of 3 ambush predators that are found on land in this area. It grabs its prey, injects it with poison, and then has to be able to hold on to them as the poison takes effect. So larger prey that are stronger than it would definitely be far too difficult, and it would be likely targeting similar sized Pokemon rather than Torkoal, as I had mistakenly suggested earlier. They're just another opportunistic predator at the end of the day, so if they have the power, then they'll eat it. And shockingly, the same can be said about the Hippopotas in the area, which are our second ambush predator. Unlike real hippos who focus on eating only marine plant life, Hippopotas decides that it wants blood, and while digging underground and swallowing sand, it will swallow down any other Pokemon that it comes across. It's effectively just one big pit trap that breaks down the rock into sand more and more, which is incredibly vital not only for Durant homes if they make them out of sand, but also for our last ambush predator, Silicobra, and just maintaining the environment to be a desert-like sandy land. Silicobra has a dark yellow pouch around its neck, which it uses to store more than 17 pounds or 8 kilograms of sand. The pouch gets more elastic with every time Silicobra sheds its skin. It collects sand by swallowing it and shoots the sand from its nostrils. Horrible to imagine how that feels. An ability it uses to blind predators so it can escape by burrowing into the ground. It also burrows into the sand in order to ambush its prey. Because Silicobra's nostrils are specialized for shooting out sand, it has a poor sense of smell. While it is named after cobras and anacondas, it definitely takes after the latter of those two, as the only poison type damaging move it can learn is by TM, not naturally, and that move is still only Poison Tail. And like the broken record that I am, this snake is going to be an opportunistic carnivore, like many of our other Pokemon that we've talked about. Though appearing alongside Silicobra's debut is also Hawlucha, with hawks being an animal that do not even fear venomous snakes, and would fear this snake even less. I've gone, honestly, back and forth on whether or not I think Hawlucha is eating other Pokemon, and while I've always leaned towards it devouring anything else that a bird of prey would, I feel like this route helps seal the deal for me. And the reason we don't see it evolve, Silicobra evolve, is because there is a very large 30% population of Silicobra in hiding, while there is still only a 2% chance of seeing Hawlucha. Now, hawks in general do have a very carnivorous diet. If it can catch it, it will eat it. Mice, rabbits, squirrels, birds, snakes, other reptiles, amphibians, insects, they are all on the dinner plate for hawks, and by that effect, they're all on the dinner plate for Hawlucha. This, alongside all of the other ambush predators hiding in the sand, would then explain why we don't see many of our first forms, including Diglett here, but rather we see Dugtrio. And long story short, they really aren't all that different from regular Diglett, other than in that they tunnel faster, can trigger tremors and earthquakes, and are even more important for revitalizing the soil of any area that they travel through. They're effectively working together in order to survive better. Though there is another ambush predator here in the form of Trapinch, technically. This little antlion Pokemon will build its conical nest, and whatever falls inside, unable to get out, is what gets eaten. They have a low encounter rate set at 5% or less, but that's likely because the rest of the Trapinch are hiding well below the surface, not moving around, and just waiting for prey to come to it. In antithesis to all of these predators, there is one Pokemon that is effectively keeping the ecosystem alive as they are fueling the herbivores of the area, and this would be Maractus. This little guy, or gal, non-binary pal, whatever you want to say, is absolutely a keystone species of Pokemon because its seeds that it spreads all over any desert that it lives in is what serves as a primary food source for many Pokemon. They also don't attack other Pokemon, they just live their best life, absorb some water alongside plenty of sunlight, dance around, shake around like the Maractus cactus that they are, Maraca cactus, there it is, and call it a life. One such Pokemon that will have an omnivorous diet here is Axew, who are also found here in very low numbers. They primarily focus on crushing berries they eat with, but their evolved forms are known to hunt prey down for a meal, so at some point along the line, this adorable little dragon will learn which Pokemon are targets for its own meals. Their tusks are used to mark its territory, though I suspect it's simply wandered over here since we have such a low population of them. As you would also expect in a desert, we have over a quarter of the population being represented by Helioptile, who gets a clear view of the sky and plenty of sunlight to keep it happy and healthy. It has no need to eat anything else, but with the turbulent weather of Galar, there's a good chance that when it can't get that sunlight, it relies on Maractus' seeds for energy on those gloomy days. Other days, it's probably just digging underground and hiding. And finally, we have another Galarian variant in the form of Yamask, who will be closing out this route for us. And while no other Pokemon would be hunting Yamask, it is also not hunting any other Pokemon itself because it has already attached to its prey. You see, Galarian Yamask is a spirit that has come into existence after someone or something touched a runestone, causing them to be cursed, or more specifically, their spirit to be cursed. This cursed tablet now attaches to the spirit once that person dies, and then siphons energy from that spirit's body, as it will eventually slowly take over in the moment that we help it evolve. Who knows what might have touched those runestones or who might have done it, but I would like to believe that it may have been one of the many different excavators that were incredibly careless in their own uncovering of the relics within this area, turning themselves into prey for such a negative curse held within these runestones. Route 7 is broken down into patches of grass, a few trees, and another bridge over a drop-off. And this is when things start to get wild, because allow me to show you the mess of a chart that shows off all the different encounter rates and how they depend on the weather. And let me tell you, this is the reason why I feared going over Galar. This is why I'm afraid of the wild areas, but this is why I am also the only person willing to do this and be crazy enough to actually complete it. Now, I actually want to start with the visible encounters, all of which are new and almost all of them are fully evolved Pokemon. Beginning with Liepard, who has only evolved as a way to compete with Thievul and proceeds to have roughly the same habits as before. It competes with Thievul for its territory, which of course we do get to see Thievul here in a slightly higher percentage of encounters. When Thievul finds a potential target, it will secretly mark a scent on them. Thievul then uses that scent to track and stalk its targets. By using its lithe body and claws, it steals the target's food and eggs from them when they least expect it. In addition, Boltund is a natural enemy of Thievul. Really cool to think of like thieves actively marking their target and then coming back to find them later, being expressed in this Pokemon. I do believe that Nickit also eats eggs, but it's nice to see the confirmation in Thievul here and how that could massively affect the ecosystem by destroying populations of Pokemon no matter what kind they are. It doesn't matter how strong you are, it will go after your eggs. It's by the effect of these two Pokemon, Liepard and Thievul, that we could make the assumption that the few Pokemon who do survive are becoming much stronger in their effort to survive and try to have more babies. The Pokemon who manages to come out on top at a 40% encounter rate despite these two is in fact another evolution, being Berserker. It has a violent and barbaric demeanor, and it lives for the thrill of battle. It and Persian have a relationship characterized by mutual disdain on account of the irreconcilable differences in their respective temperaments. Berserker boasts unrivaled strength in battle. Many epic stories tell of its valor, but despite these tales, it is noted to still have a bad habit of leaving garbage everywhere in its home, which, I mean, I wouldn't be concerned about cleaning up the bones of my enemies either if I was just this incredibly powerful Pokemon by lore standards. I mean, they even have Steely Spirit as an ability, which increases the power of Steel-type moves used by its allies, and that ability stacks. Meaning, if you run into a crowd of Berserker, then you are in a lot of trouble. And with a 40% encounter rate, there have got to be plenty of them running around here. This Pokemon is the true reason as to why there are so many evolutions in this area, or rather at least a major reason. It's laughing its head off as it shanks everyone around it, which results in the majority of Pokemon going into hiding and evolving. The only Pokemon able to stay safe are the ones great in hiding or are able to run faster than it. Otherwise, they better hope they aren't tasty enough to be interesting to this metal cat. One Pokemon that I strangely suspect to not be of interest to it is Inkay, who we do find here oddly enough. What I imagine is that Inkay might be able to get away with wandering around just because it has a lower encounter rate and other Pokemon aren't all that interested in it, which might also be stupid to say because we have a fox, a leopard, and a berserker cat, but bear with me, I guess. In addition, it does have the ability to hypnotize Pokemon, and if Berserker is truly a no-thoughts-head empty type Pokemon, as Berserkers are typically painted to be, then it wouldn't be that hard for Inkay to tell it to just go somewhere else and not eat it. In turn, Inkay as squids are typically going to find themselves eating crustaceans, fish, and other squid. Unfortunately, it is floating around on land, which would then put other small Pokemon in danger. And to even say small Pokemon are only in danger would be wrong of me to say, since I've seen these things try to hypnotize Chinchou, who are definitely larger than them. What I would then imagine is that since we do find a slew of Carablast and Shelmet hidden in the grass, it might be eating them or tried to eat some Esper, which would even explain why we only see Meowstic hiding in the grass as well amongst all the other threats that Esper would have. We might as well talk about Shelmet and Carablast next because these two Pokemon are around in every weather pattern, appear the most in sunny weather, but then completely disappear when blizzards roll in. After all, beetles and snails are going to burrow themselves deeper into the earth so they can escape being completely frozen. Long story short, Shelmet likely eats what any other snail would eat, which kind of stupid of me to say, considering some snails eat nothing, others eat other snails, some snails eat fruit, still others might just eat leaves, and then some eat literally anything and everything. Gastropods are really incredibly strange but fascinating creatures. I would guess, though, that Shelmet is eating its fill of decaying matter, since it loves, or rather prefers, to take residence in bogs and swamps more than anything else, which is a perfect place for things to get slowly broken down by water and allow for easier digestion without having to chew. Meanwhile, Carablast is literally just a snail-eating beetle, so you can easily guess that it only wants to eat Shelmet. Cut and dry, we can now move back over to our last two visible encounters, starting with Galvantula. There are only 2 electric Pokemon found in this area that it could have attached to as a Joltik, and with how dangerous this area is, it's no surprise that it had to evolve. Now that it has evolved though, its diet has become a bit more robust, choosing to prey upon small birds that would be in the area. The wild thing is saying small, while talking about the 2'7" or 0.8 meter long and 31.5 pound or 14.3 kilogram beast that this thing is. This thing is effectively a bit bigger than a border collie on average, and I'm happy it still somehow chooses smaller birds to eat. It claims to only eat the chicks that can't fly, but I personally don't believe that, especially as we don't see Rookity or Corviknight here, which is also likely because of all the other threats they have here, but that's besides the point. It just kinda sucks to be a bird on this route, I think. The other electric Pokemon that Joltik could have attached itself to, and is the last visible Pokemon coming in at 5%, which I'm surprised it even dares to walk around in the open like this, is Morpeko, who does not hide in the grass at all on this route. It carries around berry seeds that have been electrically roasted in its pockets. It treats the seeds with care as if they were precious treasures until it eats them as a snack. The seeds it stores keep its hunger at bay due to its small stomach, and unless Morpeko continues to eat its stored seeds, it will become instantly hungry. However, as seen in the Pokemon Journeys, the series episode Crowning the Chow Crusher, once Morpeko is fully fed, it will refuse to eat more food and attack anyone who then tries to feed it. Then, of course, we have the hangry mode, as Morpeko generates electricity with its cheek sacs, which consumes a lot of energy and causes it to become hungry no matter how much it eats. By experiencing prolonged hunger, the hormones in Morpeko shift in balance and its fur color changes. As a result of its intense hunger, Morpeko becomes aggressive, driven into committing all kinds of evil deeds, and enacting extreme violence until their hunger is satisfied. The energy within its cheeks also changes from electric type to dark type. I'm gonna start calling my fiance Morpeko. Morpeko is really cute. My fiance is cute. What else do you want from me? But she also gets super cranky when she's hungry. Also, story time, because long ago when I first played Sword and Shield with an old friend, we were in a Discord call as I was kind of falling asleep, and he got all excited about catching a Morpeko, and the instant he asked for a name, I woke up, shouted Snickers, because you aren't you when you're hungry, and immediately fell back asleep. At least its diet is also made very clear, choosing to primarily eat electrically roasted seeds as per the Pokédex info that it has, and choosing nothing else. Now, if only it exclusively chose to eat peanuts, then it could be the Pokemon equivalent of the Snickers mascot through and through, which, they don't have a mascot, do they? Being near Hammerlock must be influential on its choice of being here, but honestly speaking, I cannot properly track down where they are coming from in terms of the routes. Maybe we'll see a higher population in the more open wild areas in the future. Now onto the hidden encounters. These will help us reveal more onto how the types of weather affect our Pokemon, what they prefer, and maybe some of their habits. For example, we can see that Liepard can be found in all weather, but when there's a blizzard, there's a lower level range for Liepard to be found. Instead of being 36 to 40, it is 28 to 40. And this could just be that they're literally weaker because of the cold. These Liepards are moreover built for warm jungle environments, not the blistering cold, and so they might be spending more energy trying to protect themselves than they are trying to hunt something, thus resulting in a lower level range. In fact, the same exact thing can be said about Seismitoad here, who not only has a lower level range in the blizzard, but also has a lower chance of spawning when it is sunny out. This is because, at the end of the day, it is a toad, a massive toad, but a toad nevertheless. It will hunt other Pokemon since we know Palpitoad does so, which is its previous evolution, and now it's bigger and stronger in this new form, and not only shoots paralyzing liquid, but also vibrates its hands to increase its punching power. Just imagine getting cold clocked by this guy. He not only smashes your atoms, but vibrates them to the point of causing your body to break itself down. Pokemon really are scary when we think about it just a little bit longer, and yet the elderly will use Seismitoad to help them relax with vibrating massages. And since it is a toad, it's going to eat anything made of meat that is smaller than it. So this route is a bit of a beast, because it does not matter what you are, you look like food if it can defeat you. For example, I had mentioned Meowstic, and now we could talk about it here. Just as with our previous entries, they are lower level in blizzards, but otherwise have an even encounter rates all the way through. They have a better hold of their psychic powers, and while the males are more defensive, the females are more offensive in terms of power. Together, they're adorable little powerhouse couple that will effectively survive incredibly well together. It actually turns out, though, this is the first time they've been naturally encountered in the wild, so let's dig through their info more. Male Meowstic, as stated, has a strong defensive instinct. It prefers to support its allies rather than attack, despite being strong enough to blast away any opponent. It is willing to use its full power to protect itself or its partners. When a male Meowstic continues to emit its powerful psychic energy, it will damage its body as a side effect, which is a very interesting thing to note, which could then mean that the power within Meowstic in general is much higher than they're normally able to handle and have more potential and need to evolve into something stronger, something that's a better container and can outlet this energy a little bit better, which is exactly what we get with its beautiful new Mega form. I'll talk about all the Mega Dimension Megas in their own video at some point, don't worry. Female Meowstic is known to be a bit more selfish, aggressive, and aversive than its male counterpart. Should it not get what it wants, it will torment anyone with its psychic abilities. It generally has a stoic expression even when using its powers, and its unfriendliness is part of its charm. When it senses danger, it will unleash its psychic power at its maximum strength with no regard for its opponent, which kind of feels like the type of Pokemon that would say, I don't understand why people don't lead with their strongest move. Just crush them immediately and be over with it, as she just melts the brain of her opponents. I did forget to mention that Greedence is in the berry trees again as part of the hidden encounters, but oh well. Probably because I just don't like Greedence. Look, it's a fine Pokemon, but I have bad experience with it, as it just kind of tanked so many hits in my Nuzlocke, and I'm pretty sure it wiped out a couple of different Pokemon. Come say hi in my YouTube streams. I stream like twice a week usually, and it's nice to talk with you guys. Anywho, before we get to our big final Pokemon in this section, we do have the strangest chance of running into a baby a quarter of the time in the grass, which, yes, once again, it is weaker in the blizzard. All the Pokemon here are if they're hidden encounters. That baby, though, is Toxel, and I remember first picking it up from the daycare and just going, oh, you're the Magikarp of this generation. You're going on my team, just stuffing it into my back pocket, and it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. Now, Toxel is able to drink dirty water and filter it into a poison that is harmless to it. By manipulating the chemical makeup of this poison, it can produce electricity which, while having weak voltage, causes a tingling paralysis on whoever touches it. Toxel's poison and electricity are stored on two different sacs inside its body, but are both relayed through its skin. It has a selfish, attention-seeking nature and is known to throw tantrums as a result of this. I mean, it is literally a baby wearing a tail diaper. Can you really be upset about that? As noted in the sleep-style decks, Toxel tends to throw tantrums even during its sleep. Some people might feel the urge to cradle and soothe Toxel, but it instinctively releases poison from its skin, which can cause that tingling and paralyzing sensation, or rather just full-on paralysis, for anyone who hugs it. It is highly advised to observe Toxel from a safe distance for this reason. I'm going to be real though, the tingling sensation, paralysis, do you think, or do you realize even, that I am lactose intolerant, eat entire pizzas, will be in so much pain sometimes because of it that I am salivating as my body thinks I'm going to throw up, and then I will proceed to eat another slice because mama didn't raise no I will hold that Toxel in my arms and sing it lullabies to sleep like it deserves. Do not test me. Anywho, yeah, other Pokemon likely aren't eating it because it isn't tasty or they don't want to be paralyzed. Pretty good deterrent all in all, it gets to just do what it wants because of that. The last Pokemon is one that is in my top 10 favorite Pokemon of all time. It is my favorite bird Pokemon, as I said earlier, and his name is Corviknight, coming in at a solid 20% encounter rate. Corviknight is said to be the strongest bird Pokemon in the Galar region, being able to scare off any Pokemon that tries to challenge it. Due to its intelligence and flying skills, Corviknight serves a flying taxi service company called Galar Taxi, where it transports people from one location to another. It also preys on Bunnelby and has violent territorial clashes with Skarmory. Due to the extreme toughness of the steel, the wings are highly durable and it can fly mightily through the sky, unbothered, even when attacked mid-flight. This is what an apex predator would look like. This is a Pokemon that sits firmly at the top of the food chain in almost every single area that we could find it in. It is a beast of a metal bird, and I love him so much that I wish Corviknight taxis were real. They are 7 feet 3 inches tall, or 2.2 meters, and weigh roughly 165 pounds, or 75 kilograms. I could lift that. I do it regularly. I am not remotely kidding about that. 165 is child's play if I use all my muscles. Put it on my back, and I will carry it like the king that it is. But this Corviknight is here, back on track, because nearly every single Pokemon in this area is a massive threat to its Pokemon line. So the only solution to not dying was to become much larger and more powerful than any other Pokemon we would find here, and boy howdy did it meet that necessity by reaching this final evolution. Route 8 consists of 2 distinctly separate sections. The first area contains ancient ruins with ladders and stairs connecting its lower and upper sections. There's even a whole snow-covered section where it is always hailing and mostly has ice-type Pokemon. Now, Bulbapedia has this separated as Route 8 proper, and then Steamdrift Way, which is that icy section. Beginning with the proper Route 8, things get a little wild immediately, because this section is effectively a superpowered version of our desert-like route from before, except now it's even more haunted. Yay! We get not only Dusclops at a 15% rate, but also Haunter at a 10% rate. Both of them not being shy about eating anyone or anything. And I mean that almost literally, because Haunter will steal the life force of everything that is alive to the point where it doesn't care if they die. Meanwhile, Dusclops is one of the greatest gluttons known to man, as it opens up its bandages and acts like a black hole that absorbs literally anything that isn't nailed down into its body. It's a bit of a menace, but through these 2 Pokemon, we get the representation of a haunted or cursed burial site and the people that would be mummified here. Which technically there were mummies in Europe, and in the 15th century, people believed that eating mummies would cure a number of different conditions while providing health benefits. And of course, this in turn destroyed a lot of historical evidence in the process. Like, I get it. People didn't know better back then, but how stupid do you have to be to believe that eating the preserved, which isn't even perfectly preserved theoretically speaking, flesh of a human would provide any further benefit than eating any other dehydrated form of meat and skin from any other animal? Where are those people now? Where are their family lines? Did they gain superpowers or something? Are they able to read the future? Do they at least have better gut health through some mystical fiber found in human meat that we don't know about? Of course not. People back then were about as intelligent as an underwater brick. I say that, but of course there are plenty of people from a multitude of eras that were massive towards the progress of humanity. It's just that the rich are effectively the most heard about when it comes to stupidity in their final grasps for life, and I recommend eating them. Back on track, there are Rhyhorn in the area who are almost no different than real rhinos whatsoever. If we ignore the fact that they can cause earthquakes on a whim, Rhyhorn can be just a bit more territorial. They have the same diets and then just slam through rocks to dig and break through more areas to create more territory for themselves. Rhyhorn, that is, not real-life rhinos. In Hoenn, when they were on the same routes as Numel, I was able to actually see that the 2 of them fought with each other for food. Adding to the ruins part of the ancient ruins, we have Bronzong, which was likely buried under the ground, as we often see in a number of different regions. And strangely enough, they've made the claim that it likely originated from outside of the Galar region and then was brought here, which in turn would mean that they were brought here hundreds, if not thousands of years ago, or whenever these ruins were constructed, to not be too overdramatic about that. Spoiler alert, Bronzong aren't being hunted by anything in this area because there is nothing in this area that actively eats metal. And in turn, Bronzong itself doesn't eat anything. As such, it is basically a non-participant in the ecosystem here and would happily live for another couple hundreds or if not thousands of years underground if we didn't dig it up. Moving on to Hippowdon, who is just a much more massive version of Hippopotas that can now crush cars, is short-tempered as well then, which makes it more easily provoked to violence, and is the only Pokemon that the Drapion on this route will not mess with. For some undefined lore reason, despite Drapion canonically being called the Demon of the Sands, it will terrorize Pokemon and humans alike, even if those humans have swords, since they just bounce off of its body without a scratch, but they will not fight Hippowdon. They will actively avoid Hippowdon entirely. But have you seen how little a hippo in real life cares? Have you seen how a hippo would just walk through a group of crocodiles without a single care? Its head isn't empty. That thing is aura farming. I couldn't say it. I couldn't say the joke without laughing. A hippo is aura farming on the crocodiles, and those crocodiles would just not even dare to mess with them unless they want to die a horrible death. So I'm just assuming Hippowdon has the same effect on every other wildlife it ever comes across, and luckily, there are very few Hippowdon here, and even less Drapion. As a note, Drapion are actively eating whatever the heck they come across. They stab, they hold it down, they slam it against the ground a number of times, and then they call it a day, then they eat it, right? Though the smallest population of hidden encounters here goes to the adorable little Pokemon that is just a Legion of Armored Kirby, coming in at a 2% chance is Phalanx. But don't worry, there's a number of other Phalanx that randomly come out of holes throughout the area and will respawn, so this hidden encounter effectively means almost nothing. Those 2% are likely just resting and we woke them up. The 6 members of Phalanx rely on teamwork as their strategy to win battles, and constantly change formation when they fight. The 5 troopers follow their brass loyally, and the brass's orders are considered absolute by them. If it says to jump off a cliff, you jump off a cliff. Now, Phalanx are capable of fitting into small holes, as shown here in Route 8, where they can be seen marching and charging through small caves and crevices. It's like a bit of an ambush spot. I imagine they still have to avoid having a teammate snatched away by Hawlucha, for example, from time to time. A common formation that the members can change into is one in which the troopers stand in a triangular formation around the brass, either in front or behind it, which is known as the no retreat formation. In Pokemon Journeys, the members are shown to occasionally stand upon each other to execute certain moves, but this formation does not have a known name. This, of course, would then be the inspiration to the Mega form that it would later get. In Pokemon Unite, it is shown that the brass can also dispatch troopers to attack on their own, which is known as the Dispatch Formation. As seen in Grabbing the Brass Ring episode, Phalanx troopers also have the ability to mimic the cries of other Pokemon. The Phalanx Brass is the largest, strongest, and most intelligent out of the 6 members, though that does not mean it is actually intelligent or strategic. It is just the smartest of the dum-dums until it eventually learns how to actually be intelligent. It has a larger crest with an extendable horn it uses to attack and issues orders. Its shields are often chipped or nicked, and when Phalanx is marching in formation, the brass holds its 2 shields in front of its face. Now, Phalanx is a bit of a tricky one. They have no mouths, they don't seem to actively attack other targets, they focus more on training than anything else, and they focus on their bonds between each other. They are either Pokemon who do not eat anything at all, or they are Pokemon that gain energy from stronger bonds, from positive bonds. To top it off, they're part of the Fairy and Mineral egg groups, which only makes things stranger and more difficult overall. I only say that because a lot of Fairy egg group Pokemon, or Fairy Pokemon in general, have diets that are more commonly energy or emotion based. Meanwhile, the Mineral egg groups are eating other minerals as well. So I'm going to make the claim that Phalanx is primarily training, not quite digging these holes, but is using those holes as part of their team bonding, as they also fight strong Pokemon in the area, improving their bonds, which make them full of life in some way. Which, if we take the idea of Drapion in mind being attacked by swords, you might be able to make a relationship between it and Phalanx, even if Phalanx doesn't have any swords, but they are armored individuals that are human-inspired. The last hidden encounter in this section is Sandaconda, who makes up the majority of the encounters at just under a third. It uses its inflated sand pouch to protect its head from harm. The pouch can store over 220 pounds or 100 kilograms of sand, and is very elastic and thick to the point where a Durant's pincers cannot harm it. To me, it's just kind of always looked like one of those neck rests that people wear in the car or on planes. Now, Sandaconda can contract its body to spray sand stored in the pouch through its nose with tremendous force, and its unique method of coiling allows it to blast its sand more efficiently. Without finding the physics behind it, I assume it's just because there's more pressure built up by twisting its body and then loosening itself while projecting its sand out, then causes it to come out more efficiently and with more force, like a really weird tube of toothpaste. Some of the sand is combined with Sandaconda's own saliva, which then forms sharp pieces of gravel, which, at least in the Violet Pokédex, it claims that the gravel is literally just sand, thanks to when it mixed with said saliva, and not actual gravel or rocks. While Sandaconda may act tough and confident, it will become timid and cowardly the moment that it does run out of sand, which I would too. Like, that is your primary method of defending yourself, of attacking others, of literally doing everything that you can. I would run away as well. Like, what are you gonna do? Sprout hands and box somebody? No, you're a snake. Finally, Sandaconda are known to eat Durant eggs. Interesting that they don't go after the Durant themselves at all, but snakes like eggs, so what else is there to say? It's a 12.5 foot or 3.8 meter snake while coiled up, I assume, which I think if it really wanted to, then it has a lot of potential targets, but might just be going after other Pokemon eggs more than anything else, just to make sure the rest of the Pokemon don't absolutely flatten it. We do have technically one other wandering Pokemon in Crustal, but it doesn't respawn here and might have just made its way here just because of the environment itself. It ends up blocking a small path until you deal with it, and then it's just gone forever. Meanwhile, in the rest of our visible encounters, we get a low chance of seeing Lunatone and Solrock, Pokemon that rely on moonlight and sunlight, as that's when the two of them are most active. And yes, just as a reminder, the spawns do not rely on time of day, but the Pokédex has stated this info for years, so we're just sticking with the idea of moonlight and sunlight for these Pokemon being the driving power for them. They aren't eating anything, they aren't attacking anything, but they are definitely another sign of where meteors could have crashed down if their appearance here is similar to their appearance in Hoenn. Meanwhile, they've been around for at least 3,000 years in Kalos, thanks to them being in the Great War, which is strange. Speaking of Great War though, there is a 25% chance of running into a Golett here, which definitely signals to us that an ancient civilization was nearby, or really built these ruins, or was a part of it. And, oh, would you look at that, Circhester is right there. And while much of Galar is older in general, Circhester is noted to be a place where buildings from an age long gone still stand about the steaming hot spring that covers the town. Through this, we could assume that Circhester was one of the first settlements in Galar just by knowing Golett is found here. Other areas, of course, are ancient, but they may have been built or settled into later on. Kind of speculative, but still something to consider. Golett, once again, isn't eating or attacking anything unless they threaten it or the areas it might guard. Meanwhile, a Pokemon attacking everything it deems prey is seen a fifth of the time, as we see Ponyard jumping out and stabbing people in the back and ankles until they fall to their doom. This is all but directly stated, as their Pokédex does state they cling to their prey and inflict damage by sinking their blades into it. And after shredding their prey to pieces with their body composed of blades, they go down to the river and sharpen themselves on whetstones. They don't go to clean themselves, which means that, you know, all that red might not be their natural color. I don't think it cares what it's eating as long as it can have its fill of food. It's probably sticking to more organic creatures or organic matter in general, which would then explain why we don't see Hippopotas, Scorpies, Silicobra, or even a Timber here. Sure, they all might stomp on each other, but Ponyard is an aggressive little guy that I would compare to a bobcat. For context, bears do not fight bobcats. Bears should beat a bobcat, but it is not worth the energy or risk of injury, since it will continue to attack until either you or it are dead. And so bears leave those mangy things alone, thus theoretically putting bobcats higher on the food chain than a bear. Poniard is our Bobcat. And we do have another very aggressive Pokemon in even lower numbers in the form of Rufflet. It constantly provokes opponents into battling it, so that way it can get stronger as an aggressive little Pokemon that it is. And, you know, I say little, but it is 1 foot 8 inches tall, or half a meter tall. That is not as much of a little guy as it sounds anymore. That's like a toddler in a bird costume, and I will punch it the first chance that I get. They are noted to prey on Shelder and Spupa, and considering it is representative of the bald eagle, or rather its chick, it's pretty easy to find out that their diet is primarily fish at a 70 to 90% rate of dining on these sea critters. But they are noted to be opportunistic omnivores otherwise. Once again, showing us that the aggressive and the opportunistic Pokemon survive best in Galar. Again, at this point, I feel like a broken record because this route is nothing but everyone attacking everyone for the most part. Especially as I can now add in Volibee, who has a large appetite, chats with their own kind on what the most comfortable bone to wear is, and chase after weaker creatures, which, knowing that Mandibuzz is the natural predator of Cubone, we can figure out that they are effectively the bullies of the natural world. What I do love about them though is twofold. One is that they have those massive bones that do not belong to any Pokemon that we are currently aware of, and two, I am adamant to believe that they may be slightly inspired by another favorite bird of mine that I did not mention earlier, being the bearded vulture. Now, you may immediately want to disagree based on how they look, but they have the same eyes, both live in these red soil areas, typically, and they both have a major love for bones. In fact, the bearded vulture's diet consists nearly entirely of bones, which would even help explain their absolute fascination with more than just Cubone, but more so Marowak. Especially as we know there is a Marowak graveyard rumored to be somewhere out there where they get all their bones from. It's like the Volibee line is mugging someone for the pot of gold you've yet to see. And as a fun plus, the bearded vulture isn't naturally red, but instead they roll around in the red soil that they find to glam themselves up, and I just love it. It's hard to tell what the weaker population of Pokemon would be here though, since we don't see them at all. But it was once again likely many of the first form or unevolved Pokemon that are missing from this route or completely are in hiding. Up next, despite likely being inspired by the Ryukyu spiny rat, Togedemaru, who appears as a 5% encounter, is subsisting on an herbivorous diet. They themselves are not very combative, while also having a strong defense as an electric steel Pokemon that can roll around as an uncontrollable spiky ball. It's just not super pleasing to eat and would be difficult to sneak attack. Something I don't talk about enough though is how more carnivorous animals are more careful about what they choose to eat. This may be the only meal it gets for a week, a month, or even longer, and it needs to feed. So if a predator chooses the wrong target and fails to capture it, or worse, fails to capture it and gets injured, then it may be at risk of death, which is why most predators might not even bother with Togedemaru, for example. Meanwhile, herbivores will fight tooth and nail with every ounce of energy they have to escape. They have plenty of food sources available to them, so they can recover any lost energy and will go all out in a fight. For example, lions might be the king of the jungle, but they will typically not mess with my favorite animal, the giraffe, because they will kick a lion's teeth in while still booking it at a max speed of 37 miles per hour or 56 kilometers an hour, which that means that it would be illegal for a giraffe to run through a school zone. Also, that is a really big animal to be running that fast. That aside, we get to see one more pairing of Pokemon this side of the route, as not Roggenrola and Timber return, but rather Boldore and Girder do. The only real differences to know with Girder are that it is stronger, loves to train its muscles more, loves its muscles in general, and excels at demolition rather than construction. So they probably brought it in to help with uncovering some of the ancient ruins that we do find here. Meanwhile with Boldore, it's still searching for underground water and has a great sense of hearing, making it a phenomenal Pokemon to listen for any hollow points in the ground to avoid anyone losing their lives by stepping on the wrong spot. These two Pokemon may naturally occur here, but I also believe that they were brought here to help with past excavation and may have been naturalized to the area, meaning that they made their home here effectively without becoming invasive species. We can now move on to the other part of this route, which is once again still technically the same route, but is so different that it may as well be properly separated as we dip into Steamdrift Way. Starting with hidden encounters as always, we have Delibird, who is noted to be an omnivore directly by Pokédex information. It's often offering bugs to others according to a side quest within Legend ZA, but I wouldn't be surprised to find out there were small mammals on its diet as well. They're never noted to be timid from what I can find, but once again, they are incredibly quick to run away in Legend ZA, so do with that information what you will. They're likely not only digging up food that's hiding underground, but are likely being cordial with Snover, who are also in the area in slightly higher numbers. Snover will migrate to colder weather whenever the temperature changes, and they primarily intake water by digging their roots deep into the snow itself. Their berries can be an important food source for Pokemon that they might even attack Snover for them. Luckily, it seems as though there aren't any Pokemon here that would be that aggressive on purpose and would likely just be overeager, meaning Snover can live mostly in peace. The Pokemon that only has a 5% chance of appearing while in hiding here is Galarian Darumaka. Seismic shift in the Galar region long ago caused the warm climate to cool, and Darumaka in this region have adapted to this cooling. The fire that burned within their bodies went out, leaving an organ that produces cold air instead. Though to clarify that further, they still have the old organ. It just doesn't work currently unless they have a certain special ability when they evolve. The colder Galarian Darumaka gets, the more energetic it becomes. They can focus their internal energy to breathe out cold air in the form of snow, which they use to make snowballs for ammo in playful snowbites with each other. Now, they also enjoy eating berries produced by Snover, which may cause them to get overzealous, and for the Darumaka to have to be driven off by Abomasnow if necessary. Now, at the end of the day, these are effectively orangutan children, just in the cold. And with orangutans, their diets are primarily fruit-based, hitting at about 60%. They may eat leaves, tree bark, roots, insects, and even small mammals, but there seems to be no real evidence of this with Darumaka or Darmanitan, and instead, they are sticking to their herbivorous diet. A Pokemon who definitely isn't doing that and is effectively an obligate carnivore is Sneasel. Not only will it hunt other Pokemon alongside others of its kind, but it will sneak around to break open eggs and drink out their insides. After all, those claws are effective for more than just climbing. Just poke a little hole and slurp it out. They make up a quarter of the hidden and a fifth of the visible encounters, so they're definitely sneaking up on prey and then walking around like they own the place in groups. Luckily, there are Throw and Sock in the area that won't be dealing with their shenanigans. To briefly speak on that duo, Throw and Sock have a 5% encounter rate and are gym rats at the end of the day. They live, breathe, and eat for their training, with Throw practicing with others and Sock practicing in solitude. They're both pure fighting types, so once again, likely not eating other Pokemon. Though the wild thing I talked about in my video trying to find the strongest Pokemon with science is that Sock, at its strongest, is said to be able to part the ocean with a single chop. Like literally Moses and Red Sea levels of power, but for an ocean and a chop, which is more powerful than nearly every single other feat of strength in Pokemon, including G-Max forms. A big win for Sock lovers out there. Our last hidden encounter that makes up 40% of hidden and 40% of the visible encounters is the adorable snow-eating Snom. I mean that literally. Snom exclusively eats snow. Its name is a combination of snow and nom, as in to bite onto something, so, makes sense. Snom anchors itself to branches with frigid thread it extrudes from its mouth, to disguise itself as an icicle while sleeping. It consumes snow that is piled up on the ground and prefers soft, fresh snow. It will climb its way up a mountain, eating through snow the entire way up. This Pokemon. I aspire to be this Pokemon. Its internal organs amplify the cold air from the snow it consumes, which it uses to create the spikes on its back. The more snow it eats, the larger and more impressive the spikes grow. Once again, we have a Pokemon that would be nothing more than a cute little blob were it not for the shell it grows from its body. As shown in Pokemon Camp, Snom are known to be voracious eaters, only being satisfied with heaping amounts of food. If it is startled, it will quickly burrow into the snow. I do find it a bit interesting that it kind of just skips the cocoon stage altogether, but you could make the claim that these spikes are its cocoon. You know, it grows more spikes the more it eats. So once it properly eats enough, its entire body looks no different than a giant super sharp jackfruit. There are a couple of possibilities for its inspirations, like the jewel caterpillar, Arctic moths, or even more specifically, the Arctic woolly bear moth, which can enter a dormant state that allows it to endure temperatures as low as 94 or negative 94 degrees Fahrenheit or negative 70 degrees Celsius. I've actually run into these caterpillars before, as I found one literally right on the wall outside of my house, right by my door, and every part of my existence had to refrain from touching it, because part of me wanted to touch it because it was like, ooh, fuzzy caterpillar. Then the, intelligent side of my brain said, oh no, that's not normal, you've read about this, do not touch that thing directly, and you should not do that, because they have bristles that break off and cause itching and irritation to the skin. So, no touching those fuzzy guys, no matter how cute they look, and you probably don't want to touch Snom either, with how cold its body likely is. Some just might be a staple of Delibirds' diet now that I think about it, especially with such a high population. I do wonder how nutritious they actually are, considering they only eat snow. Our last entries are Snorunt and Vanillish, with Snorunt being the best Ice-type Pokemon, and I will accept no arguments against that. But it literally just eats ice and is often hunted by other, more carnivorous Pokemon that eat ice. Meanwhile, with Vanillish, it is staying in cold environments, drinks water, and continues to try and grow its body so it can eventually evolve. Luckily, there aren't any Pokemon like Glalie in the area that want to hunt down and eat ice Pokemon, otherwise these two would likely be in a lot of trouble. On to Route 9, we begin on what Bulbapedia calls the proper route that is snowy and eventually leads into Circhester Bay that is full of chunks of ice and a few spots of land. Starting with proper Route 9, we have all new Pokemon as you've probably come to expect at this point. The lowest population of Pokemon being Pincurchin. They have 5 hard teeth which they use to feed on seaweed by scraping them off rocks and other surfaces. As its food digests, Pincurchin generates electricity, which it then stores in its spines. If one of the spines gets broken off, it will continue to emit electricity for approximately 3 hours. Pincurchin's yellow mouth parts, in contrast, do not conduct electricity. It has a timid and easily frightened disposition and will discharge electricity when startled. This serves well as protection against its natural predator, Mareanie, which I'm not gonna lie, not only did I not realize Mareanie eats this Pokemon since it doesn't eat Corsola here, but also those spines are a phenomenal predator deterrent. Imagine breaking one of those off in the roof of your mouth as you're trying to eat this thing and you're stuck being electrocuted for 3 hours straight. I imagine that even when Pincurchin does die, its entire body stays electrically active for 3 hours as well. So Mareanie is a bit of a trooper for still being so willing to try and eat Pincurchin. Up next at a quarter of the hidden encounters is Kingler, who, being a crab, is another omnivore willing to eat algae, seaweed, worms, other crabs, fish, everything it can catch with its claws, and its really, really big claw for that matter. Of course, Kingler would be more interested in large fish or clams, but is likely making do with any meal that it can knock out with its big pincer. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised to find out that it is going after our next 2 entries, and those next 2 entries might be going after it as well, as we have Octillery and Cramorant. Octillery is absolutely hunting fish in the area, but unfortunately for Kingler, Octillery won't be taking its attacks lying down, and instead will fight back, as octopi will not hesitate to eat crabs, lobsters, or shrimp. If it was large enough, it would be able to prey on Sharpedo, but those sharks aren't here. Again, we're seeing this strong pattern of Pokemon who have specialized diets that nobody else is eating, and Pokemon with a wide array of foods to choose from. Cramorant, as we move on to this bird, is a gluttonous Pokemon with an instinctive desire to swallow anything whole. It generally hunts for prey alongside riverbanks. Its preferred prey is Arrokuda, but sometimes it tries to swallow other Pokemon, such as Pikachu, attempting to spit them out if it realizes its mistake. If it doesn't realize its mistake, I imagine Pikachu won't be alive much longer. As mentioned in the sleep style decks, Cramorant is known to occasionally sleep while still swallowing its prey. The reason for this behavior is unknown to everyone, including Cramorant itself. Man just wants a bit of a midnight snack. I feel that energy. Cramorant is noted to be quite strong, to the point where it can knock out some opponents in one hit. However, it is also rather unintelligent, forgetful, and bad at learning, as the energy used by its brain is minimal. It tends to focus more on battling, but sometimes it can't remember what it is battling mid-fight. This thing is just really filling its head with rocks, and despite its forgetfulness, Cramorant never forgets trainers that it trusts. However, it will try to attack its trainer if they try to steal its food. It just has big himbo energy from the sound of it, and with it living in this area, there are tons of meals for it to choose from if it isn't trying to eat Octillery and Kingler. Within the water, we get to see more Octillery, taking up 60% of the encounter rate, with the Pokemon that serves as both the bottom and top of the food chain, Wishiwashi, coming in at 30%. It is super important to note that the Wishiwashi here are level 38, meaning they absolutely will transform into their school form when threatened. The problem with this is that while the game mechanic allows this to happen immediately in battle, this is assuming that there are enough Wishiwashi around it in order to attain this gargantuan size quickly enough. If not, then its school form is effectively meaningless. And this is important because Wishiwashi are the staple food of the Pokemon world, or at least wherever they do appear. They are more than just a minnow. They are commonly sought after foodstuffs of others, prey for all who want fish, and a perfect drive-by target if Pokemon like Cramorant want to just dive in, grab one, and then leave. Even humans eat Wishiwashi, or at least used to eat them more often before the school forms would appear. I actually recently watched A Life on Our Planet by David Attenborough, which traveled through the many years he's been experiencing the world and its ecology. And there was one part that I'm reminded of while talking about Wishiwashi here, and that is the depletion of wildlife areas for fish. Fish were becoming more and more scarce. Fisheries then had to subsidize or be subsidized in order to stay in business and continue catching food people needed, such as in Japan. And then, while I can't remember the country that did it, it was one that tourism for the water and fishing was a huge staple for their economy. They eventually had to adapt to this issue and created no fishing zones. And over time, these zones became so abundant with fish that they eventually started to completely fill the zones where the people were allowed to fish, as they drifted out, leaked out into these fishing zones. And now they have more than what they need for their fisheries and for their food consumption. Honestly, I highly recommend the documentary if you have access to it. I just about cried while watching it, and it sparked what I needed for so many more ecology videos that I'm very excited to complete. But back on track, the last Pokemon you have to fish for here is coming in at 10% with Pyukumuku. And while I had worried that these critters would die since they effectively refuse to move from their habitats once they find a home they like, causing them to deplete their food sources as they filter feed, and then eventually they squish into nothingness and pass away from starvation, you guys in the comments actually pointed something out to me. When Pyukumuku eventually does run out of food and starts to lose weight and strength, it won't be able to stay in place against the movement of water wherever it is. And because of this, the underwater currents will push Pyukumuku to new locations where it can get its fill of food once more. So, no dying for Pyukumuku despite being so stubborn, although it still has to defend itself as the sea cucumber that it is from other creatures such as fish, crabs, sea stars, or even sharks. And since we are in the Pokemon world, we definitely have Kingler, Octillery, Cramorant, and a number of our other visible encounters attacking it. The one Pokemon not eating Pyukumuku is Pelipper, who will go after fish in the area, or really anything that it can fit in its mouth, with no real exception, since it is a pelican and those birds have been documented eating everything they see. Which makes sense now as to why they decided to have Wingull evolve into it, since seagulls eat just about everything they can see as well. But by contrast, it has been shown in Pokemon Snap and through Dex entries that Pelipper will just carry small Pokemon in its bill without eating them, with Pyukumuku being a very specific example within Pokemon Snap, and of course you and I know that this is not always going to be the case when it's real hungry. But you might ask, why are there no Wingull here? Well, likely because there are threats such as Jellicent, and if Cramorant is like real Cramorants, then it just might eat other birds, and Kingler is once again a threat here. Jellicent is a horrifying Pokemon to me and to most other people, especially as it is directly noted to attack cruise ships and drag the ships and their residents down into the very bottom of the ocean, where they like to steal the life force of the people on the boats while dragging them to the bottom of the ocean as well. They don't have a preference at the end of the day who their prey is, they feed on whatever they can reasonably grab. A not so reasonable Pokemon to grab would be the Gastrodon East Sea versions that live here. They're a little harder to understand at first, but through their habits in Sinnoh and their Pokedex entries, we're able to figure out that they have two different goops that they release. One is a slime that it releases as it moves across the sand, which allows it to help break down the sand or soil and reveal microorganisms that it does eat, though its primary food source is noted to be plankton in the water, as we see through Alola Pokedex information. The other goop that it releases is one that is purple, bitter, and incredibly sticky, which renders Gastrodon completely inedible and effectively goops up a predator's mouth, allowing Gastrodon to then escape. It's a pretty cute Pokemon that has some great survival tactics to prevent anything from eating it whatsoever, though Shellos isn't always as effective in the same way, which is why we don't see them here. And after mentioning it enough times, we finally do get to see Mareanie. There aren't any normal Corsola for them to eat here, so as we discussed, they're feeding on Pincurchin. They are, without a doubt, based on the Crown of Thorns starfish, which only feeds on coral as an adult. And Pincurchin is an urchin, whose bodies are primarily calcium carbonate, which explains why Mareanie would go after them in place of these coral. It just needs that calcium. And even if these Pokemon weren't around, coral, separate from Corsola, does exist within the world, meaning there are literal coral polyps, which are normal animals for Mareanie to feed on in place of the Pokemon. In turn, it's not easy to eat these purple-blue critters, but there are some Pokemon that may eat Mareanie in this area, because apparently Triton snails, triggerfish, and pufferfish all eat this starfish, meaning that Gastrodon and Quillfish will likely be eating it, even though Gastrodon isn't really a Triton snail, so it might not even actually try to eat it at all. Do with that what you will. With Quillfish at 30% of the encounters while surfing, it deters predators looking to eat it by puffing up, of course, and then fills its stomach in turn with mollusks, crabs, shrimp, algae, goodness gracious, coral sponges, bristleworms, starfish, and even other urchins, which it's gotta be rough for Pincurchin. I could see why it's an electric type now. It is doing everything it can to just keep half of the water-based ecosystem from eating it in Galar. Pelipper, I will note, does make up 40% of the surfing encounters as it skims the surface for food. The Jellicent rarely come up to the surface, which then explains why they appear at a 5%. And then we get to see Mantike at 25% as it breaks the water to soar briefly into the sky before crashing back down into the water. The real-life versions of Mantike are just filter feeders at the end of the day, of course meaning that they are eating plenty of plankton in the area here, and actually, the Mantike come here from a different location very close by. This area extends into Circhester Bay, as we've discussed, and that of course would connect to the greater ocean, allowing plenty of much larger Pokemon to visit here and connect into the area. It would also explain why we see enough plankton on this route to feed other Pokemon who have them as their primary diet. We do get a return of Pokemon, Gastrodon East, Inkay, Cramorant, and Pincurchin as hidden encounters, Greedents in the trees, and then for fishing, we not only get the 50% of Mantike, but their parents are much closer as we get a 10% chance of Mantine. Our larger, more omnivorous predators may try to eat them, and this may be a spawning ground for them, but there isn't much to say about them otherwise. We also find that there's a 34% chance of Wailmer and a 5% chance of Wailord, with their diets primarily being plankton as you would expect of baleen whales. They definitely get a few other creatures caught up in their mouths though, which is incredibly dangerous for Wailord and the accidental meal. This is because I was informed that even though their bodies are absolutely massive, whales' throats are still no bigger than roughly a dinner plate, meaning even baleen whales in the real world could not swallow us whole. They will instead choke and die, so it can just stick to its regular meals for their safety and our own. And Then, moving on, despite liking the cold, Lapras only appears here as a 1% encounter, likely just to visit as a resting point. It is a marine reptile that eats plenty of fish, and by now has had its population restored for long enough that it is not noted to be lowering the fish population within Galar, but has been doing so where they have large families in places like Alola. I can also effectively guarantee that Lapras is not being eaten by any other Pokemon whatsoever. Even Sharpedo within the Lentil region don't mess with Lapras. Overall, it just seems more like the Lapras are passing through the area more than anything else, as I stated. You may have questioned where Remoraid are since we have Octillery and the Mantike line, and here in the Bay is where we see it as part of the visible encounters, though they still only make up 15% of the population. And in place of being able to shoot down bug Pokemon as they aren't in the area for this little fish to eat, they have to team up with Mantike and Mantine a bit more often than they might already do. By working together, the Mantike survive better, allowing them to evolve into Mantine, and for the Remoraid to feed on their scraps until they can finally evolve into Octillery. Because of this, this may be the actual reason as to why we see such a high population of these Pokemon. We still get, in this area, Mantike, Mantine, and Wailmer, but not Wailord here. They don't seem to come up to the surface as much, or it's just, a limitation of the game since it's such a large Pokemon in regards to just wandering and seeing them as a visible encounter. Our other visible encounters give us nearly a quarter encounter rate of Octillery. We add in clusters of Bergmite, which haven't revealed a proper diet, honestly. They form an icy shell on their body by freezing moisture around them, but we don't get a canon diet. Just a mechanical diet like berries in Legends Arceus. These little guys have always just kind of felt like a toss-up to me, but I have a feeling they just drink water and filter feed, or absorb minerals from the water, which would effectively make them chemotrophs. Hard to know for sure, and they're gonna vibe without worrying about anything coming to eat them, besides the singular Glalie that doesn't respawn in the previous proper route. Which is a bit of a problem because they really like eating things made of ice, and it means that there are likely Glalie in places where we can't see them. The last of the repeat Pokemon from previous regions we've talked about is Barbaracle, and while it looks terrifying, while it looks like it would rip you apart from limb to limb, and it is the nightmare of artists as we have it here with all of its hands, looking like a favorite Pokemon of Shigaraki, it's just a bunch of Binacle grouped together. They're nothing more than goose-necked barnacles, which are crustaceans, so anything that eats a crustacean may try eating them, and they just filter feed for things like plankton. A very spooky creature for a very simple and peaceful existence. For the first time as well, we can encounter a wild Toxapex thanks to the couple of different Pokemon that would actually be willing to try and eat Mareanie. Toxapex uses its legs to walk along the ocean floor, where it hunts for Corsola in other regions. They can also be used to create a dome-like shelter, protecting it from the tides and, in colder regions, trapping its body heat to keep it warm, which is exactly what it's doing here in Galar. Plus, between a stronger defense, the poison we'll talk about soon, and more, it really allows Toxapex to outcompete other Pokemon and survive in the harshest of conditions where others would fail. Its spines sense the flow of tides, allowing it to survey its surroundings. They can also be fired at enemies, and they carry a powerful poison, which causes pain for 72 hours, even to Pokemon as large as Wailord. After effects of the venom remain even after recovery. If a foe bypasses its spines, it attacks with its claws instead. And Bruxish is noted to be a natural enemy and will actively choose to try and eat this Pokemon's line, even if they're not found here. They compete against it in warm ocean currents, despite the odds being against Toxapex. I honestly love the idea that Toxapex decides it's gonna bring the fight to Bruxish to get rid of the excuse that there was a home field advantage. Also, that poison is horrifying depending on just how much pain it gives. If we're talking a bit of Poison Ivy, that's one thing. If we're talking full potency Stinging Nettle without the pain dulling, that's a whole new level. Or even if it causes pain so bad that it effectively debilitates you for those 3 days, that's pretty rough. It's really hard to know. Either way, if it does that to a Wailord, I think everything else should stay pretty far away. They appear a good fifth of the time, so there's a good chunk of them lining the floor of this bay. To follow at a 1% encounter, we get to talk about Delmise. It prefers large prey such as Wailmer and Wailord. The heavy anchor can be swung with enough force to knock out its prey in a single blow, and the victim is then enveloped in seaweed, which can be stretched hundreds of yards. And in doing so, the life force of its prey is slowly drained. In addition to hunting, this Pokemon maintains itself by adding new detritus and seaweed to its body. It is known to get along well with Skrelp and Dragalge. They're also a bit strange because they are said to be born when a piece of seaweed merges with a sunken ship, or when the soul of seaweed comes to life after drifting for long enough, dumb eyes to clarify that. Either way, it seems like either the soul of a plant commands this thing, or the soul of someone lost to a shipwreck is reborn into this thing. It's definitely partially a reference to Moby Dick as Captain Ahab hunted whales, and of course this thing loves to hunt Wailmer and Wailord. But outside of this, we of course don't have sentient seaweed taking over anchors in the real world and hunting down prey. Now the big reason it gets along with Skrelp and Dragalge, even though they aren't found here, is because they love eating rotting seaweed and blend in with said seaweed. So maybe once some of the seaweed breaks down too much to be of use to Dhelmise's body, it gives its seaweed to Skrelp and Dragalge. Otherwise, I heavily doubt anything is actively hunting this Pokemon, and it's another one we'd find at the top of the food chain. Our last Pokemon of this subsection is not only Clobbopus, but also its evolution Grapploct. Clobbopus has easily torn tentacles which allow it to escape from predators. These tentacles can be regrown later though. Its intelligence is comparable to that of a 3-year-old human. It is a very curious creature and often investigates things by punching them with its tentacles. It normally lives underwater, but is known to surface onto land to search for food. Being an octopus, there is a mouth underneath it as you would expect, and it's going to have the same diet as Octillery, except it's going to be a lot more punchy. Have you seen how curious children can be? This octopus child is going to punch every single fish that passes it by, whether it's hungry or not. It's also a little bit funny because a real-life octopus will genuinely punch fish or other creatures in general. It doesn't work as well outside of the water, but pretty effective underwater. Meanwhile, its evolution with a body made of pure muscle, Grapploct possesses very powerful grip strength. It enjoys fighting opponents and moves onto the land to fight them before returning to its ocean home. Again, getting rid of the home field advantage excuse. It uses its prized tentacles to pin opponents to the ground. The tentacles are so powerful that not even the strongest Pokemon are said to be able to break free from their hold, though I definitely feel like Machamp would like to have some words. But at the same time, with that many arms and with a good enough lockdown technique, it would take a lot to break out of it. And even if you are strong and you could have the strength to break out, good luck not hurting yourself. Been there, done that. Lastly, while it isn't here in this area, Golisopod is the natural predator or prey of Grapploct, or rather, they are both natural enemies, and to the winner goes the spoils as they eat whoever dies, in their fight. Now, Outer Spikemouth would be the next area, but it really doesn't have any Pokemon interactions we haven't discussed already. I will at least say, though, that considering Spikemouth is very run down from not being built on a power spot, it means Pierce doesn't Dynamax his Pokemon, there's less tourism, and the place has become pretty run down. This then attracts Pokemon that would be considered underhanded, Pokemon that are typically scavengers or ruthless, which is why we get Liepard, Thievul, Berserker, and then Little Morpeko in this area. Our final route, but not our final section, is Route 10, a snowy mountain road that is split into 2 sections with different encounters. Higher populations of Vanillish return alongside low populations of Snom and Darumaka, followed up with a quarter chance of Rhydon, of all things. They've appeared in places like Cerulean Cave, Victory Road, and the colder routes before, but not in full-on snowy routes like this. My only bet is that its dex entries do note that thanks to its armor-like hide, it can live inside of molten lava at 3600 degrees Fahrenheit, meaning that whatever this hide is, it's thick enough to keep lava from cooking it, from breaking through, you name it, meaning that it's thick enough to keep it safe from snow and colder environments, we will assume. It also likely bores a hole in the mountains to rest and retain heat, only to come out of the warmer cave to scrape away the snow and eat up the grass and other flora. This then also makes me think about the diet idea I talked about earlier, with certain age groups of Pokemon being more likely to eat certain kinds of food. So despite Rhydon being a ground rock type, it's in the monster and field age groups instead of a mineral group. So it's really like their biology does dictate what food they eat or might eat. They are going to be territorial, they are going to attack Pokemon that get too close to where it lives, and there are a few Pokemon that are capable of fighting back. With this being a cold environment, we find that anything with the power of magnets has the capacity to evolve easier and grow stronger, which is why we see Clang here. You might not associate them with magnets immediately, but thanks to their main abilities being plus or minus, and then Clink also being found typically in electrically charged semi-magnetic Charstone Cave in Unova, it gives us a full picture as to why they're here. The Clang here are simply looking for a place to stay safe and eventually evolve through building up enough life energy through their movements. Their habits haven't changed overall, but it is interesting to note that it is used as a logo for companies in Galar, especially as it is a symbol of industrial technology. We move on to the visible encounters, getting Snover back in 20% as this is where they like to commonly live. Glalie is here in a 10% chance, also showing that they like to stick around this area and live here thanks to all the Pokemon made of ice that it can eat. And we get little Cubchoo who have wandered away from their families further north. They're bears, omnivores, though of course with them being polar bears, they are a little bit more on the carnivorous side. I did suspect that they might actually be Growler or Pizzly bears, basically the mix between grizzly and polar bears, thanks to them still existing in warmer weather and not finding an issue with it. They of course prefer colder weather, but that isn't good enough proof, and it's just an idea overall that I had with the Unova ecology. There's also the 10% chance of running into Vanillux, who we have seen only in Giant Chasm, Dragon Spiral Tower, and Mount Lanakila before now. And can you guess what they're doing? You're right! It takes in a bunch of water and then releases snow everywhere. It is a living creature that just helps regulate the ecosystem here. I also find it a little cute that according to Bulbapedia, we have this fan art of it without its snow cap created by its designer, James Turner. This guy also made Golurk, Buzzwole, G-Max Gengar, and so many other Pokemon and characters that it put a nice little grin on my face when I first saw that these are Pokemon he created. Back to Route 10 for our last visible encounter of this section, making up nearly a third of all encounters is Mr. Mime Galarian form. Through its feet, it is able to control the temperature and create a floor of ice, which it can kick up to act as a barrier. It is widely known in the region for its talent in tap dancing, which contrasts Cantonian Mr. Mime's talent in pantomiming. It is likely the result of Mr. Rhyme's influence over Mime Jr. imitating their dance steps. As I've claimed with regular Mr. Mime, this one is not eating any form of meat whatsoever. There's no evidence in any form of games or in the anime that Mr. Mime eats meat. And Mr. Mime in the anime is only ever seen sitting in front of things like potato chips, Pokemon kibble, and whatever else is not composed of meat. Though it has prepared meals with meat in them for Ash and Delia Ketchum, sat at the table and did not have a plate in front of it, so that has to get at least a little bit awkward when you know you're cooking up other Pokemon. The influence that it has is more on the people of the Earth, I would say, and of course Little Mime Juniors. Though I guess you could say that this all had to start with one little junior who liked watching human tap dancing more than human mimes and decided to evolve this way. From there, their kind continued to become Mr. Mime in either form, Mr. Rhyme in Galar, and create more of their own species. Someone also shout in the comments if these are your favorite Pokemon, because I always feel super hit or miss with them depending on where I see them. Detective Pikachu movie, great Mr. Mime. Regular games with him wandering around, a little off-put for some reason, but you know, Mime Jr. is very adorable, especially with James in the anime. After all, every Pokemon is someone's favorite, and it's always a little precious when you guys find each other in the comments and see that even just two of you both love Chimecho as your favorite, as I saw in the comments of one of my shorts recently. We move on to the northern section of Route 10 to find Vanillish making up a third of the population, Darumaka still only taking up 5%, Beartic is here in a quarter of the encounters, as this is where the Cubchoo come from, even though they aren't here in this specific patch, and we have Abomasnow in the 28%, to help protect the Snover from a few aggressive Darumaka, alongside protecting it from the aggressive Beartic and soak up plenty of sunlight. Our new hidden encounters only have a 2% chance of appearing. The first is Ice-Q, who is also hiding from the very scary predator that is Beartic. Now, Ice-Q comes from extremely cold areas. Even its dex entries state that it came from a frigid place, meaning that I just realized, Ice-Q is from an Antarctic region that we haven't seen yet. Please, I beg to see that region as a side place. I get that might actually mean they come from the Frigid Sea in the DLC, but I don't believe that since their rates there are only 15% as an encounter. So again, I beg, let me visit the home of these penguins. And like, as a tangent, there's one thing I really want to do, but I likely will never be able to do at this point, since I just don't have the qualifications, and that's just going on a research trip to Antarctica. It was like a little bucket list idea that I had when I was going through my degree, when I was going through college. It just feels like it would be an amazing capstone for life that would take away a few months of the year from me and feels important to me as we study and monitor ice and global warming overall. And just as a final note to that, I'd wanted it for so long, and then after, I don't know, a couple years of desiring this idea to go and do this, there was eventually an anime released called A Place Further Than the Universe, which actually is really amazing. 4 girls, they decided to go to Antarctica with a research team to not only complete research, but to also find out what happened to one of their mothers, who was a researcher that disappeared there. It's 1 season, highly recommend it. It's all that it needs to be perfectly wrapped up and a pretty chill season overall, or show overall. Moving on though, Ice-Q can produce cold air from inside its head to create ice to protect its head from heat. The ice, however, is not very durable, as a strong blow can shatter it, after which it goes on to create new ice. The ice then starts to form around its hair at first, which is a singular little strand of hair, which it is legitimately noted directly in the Dex to be hair instead of feathers, meaning they named it wrong, or Ice-Q isn't actually a bird, which, to be fair, it is a Pokemon, and Pokemon are technically not animals, but it's still strange to realize. Now, Ice-Q is easygoing by nature. It is a poor swimmer and is often seen aimlessly floating in the ocean with just its ice-covered head floating on the surface, occasionally washing up on distant shores. It never panics or gets upset whenever it ends up in a new land, instead continuing to do what it does and adapt. The ice on its head is stated to have a mildly salty taste, presumed to be caused by it having floated in the oceans. When the weather is hot, groups of them will cool each other down by pressing their ice cube heads together. Its hair is connected to the surface of its brain, which then chills the air around it when it has something on its mind. I want to just imagine then that meme where it was like, hey, you could play a prank on your friends, and where they pulled like the hair and it was actually just pulling someone's nerve ending, and they just do that to this poor little Ice-Q. Finally, Ice-Q also uses its hair to catch prey in the sea, by forming ice balls at the tip and dipping it into the water like a fishing line. It is a penguin at the end of the day, so we would expect no less than, of course, it eats fish. As a fun note, it's really cool to understand that the ends of penguin feathers are densely arranged, contoured, and have effectively adapted to trap heat so that they can survive in the colder conditions and even prevent water from sticking to their body or even just going to their body. It'd be pretty bad if they got water under their feathers and it froze, because at the end of the day, they're not immune to the cold. They're just wearing a very effective natural armor against it, for one way of explaining it. The other hidden encounter here likely isn't hidden because it's hiding, but rather it is not easily noticeable by us or other Pokemon. This is because the 8'2" or 2.5 meter Stonejourner is hiding in plain sight and not easily identified and separated from other stone structures in the area. And since the TCG likes to show us other forms or ideas behind things, we get to see a resting Stonejourner there, showing us how much easier it can hide away if it wasn't showing its face or held its arms in the air. Occasionally, Stonejourner will unleash a burst of speed to perform dynamic feats with its legs. Most of the time, it stands in a field watching the sun's progress, preferring a quiet life. Curiously, once every year on a certain day, groups of Stonejourner gather from all over to form an evenly spaced ring or circle. No one knows the reason why they assemble in this formation, leading to many theories involving the position of the sun, the Earth's energy, and other factors. Another curiosity is that the elemental composition of the rocks that form Stonejourner's body were found to match the bedrock of a land far away from its native habitat. Stonejourner primarily makes its home, though, in grasslands. This is about as obvious of a reference as we can get to the historical England landmark known as Stonehenge. Some of these stones there are known to have traveled over 150 miles, or 250 kilometers away from where they originally resided, and there are still no complete concrete answers as to why they are there. Though theories have often currently agreed that they aligned with the movements of the sun, with a strong worship of the sun as a whole, or rather a belief system that relied on the sun. Funny, knowing that Galar faced the darkest day, and knowing there were a couple of Pokemon important for keeping people alive in the harshest of winters, like G-Max Colossal. We do also get to see Volcarona in the DLC, so we can even tie that to Stonejourner and the possibility that they were often paired together for worship of some kind. With no diet, no other habits, and it being a rock that likes to do nothing, we could just say that it doesn't need to eat anything and is otherwise very removed from the ecosystem. Though if it stays in one spot long enough, it would serve as a fantastic place for Pokemon, especially insects, to make a home near or under. Moving on to the visible encounters, Galarian Mr. Mime takes up 40% of them in all weather except sunny, where it only drops by 5%. Ice types don't like the sun, who would have guessed? Meanwhile, Cubchoo, not being well adapted to the cold just yet, increases from 15% in all weather to a 20% in sunny weather. Sneasel continually takes up 14%, likely not interested in any of the other visible Pokemon in the area, since it would be too much work, and they don't have the numbers to fight off larger threats like the single Wandering Beartick and Abomasnow that will consistently respawn. Snover are here in larger numbers, taking up nearly a third of the population, and then our last Pokemon of the routes is coming in at a 1% chance with Duraludon. Its body is made of strong, but surprisingly light special metal. The armor possesses a glossy, mirror-like finish and is both durable and resistant to scratches. Weighing only 88 pounds or 48 kilograms, or 14 kilograms, it can move very fast. However, its body can easily rust, so it lives in caves and mountainous areas and avoids rain, which seems a little strange that we would find it here in the snowy lands, but there's more to this, because not only is it looking for a metal alloy that would allow it to evolve in the next generation, but also the metal body has a risk of overheating, so it vents the heat out through the slits in its tail. Otherwise, it can conserve energy within it by living in the cooler environment and not having to constantly vent it out. It uses its arms, which have slightly different shapes from each other, to grind down rock surfaces for food as well. It has a rivalry with Tyranitar, which it shares its habitat with, and they often battle each other in the mountains of Galar. It is known to mainly reside in caves and mountains within cold areas. So for whatever reason, this Pokemon that can go toe-to-toe with Tyranitar, who destroys entire landscapes and mountains and is much larger and weighs so much more, is just wandering around here. It's easy to say that other Pokemon aren't going to bother it, but there is the small chance it might attack Stonejourner if it believes it has tasty minerals for it, which would also explain its own high-speed movement. This is when things start to get a little bit complicated, because to reach places such as the Motostoke Outskirts, you still have to go through the cities, which would then extend into places like the second Galar Mines or the Glimwood Tangle later on, and I nearly missed them. And I could have placed them earlier, but I honestly just did not feel like rewriting and moving explanations around. There are other places that I am skipping for now, and I'll explain later as to why. Though here in the outskirts we have Ponyard as 20% of the encounters, small amounts of Choodle, nearly a third of the encounters are Roggenrola, and depending on the version you have, a little over a third of the encounters being Croagunk or Scraggy. Croagunk is a poison dart frog with some solid punching power behind it. Though the species isn't one to just fight other Pokemon, it will only fight when necessary. It's usually been a bit inconsistent in regards to what I would imagine as its diet would be, especially as real-life dart frogs are typically eating invertebrates like ants, termites, and beetles, but we don't see anything like that here. Instead, I imagine that Croagunk knows there are some more aggressive Pokemon in this area, and it might instead just wait to be attacked or ambush others only when necessary for a meal. Meanwhile, with Scraggy, despite being the lizard that it is and also expecting it to eat insects, it's also primarily sticking to a diet of fruits and seeds. We first see this in Unova, as there was no real prey for it to eat, and instead there were plenty of Maractus seeds and detritus for it to take advantage of as more of a scavenger, something that isn't unheard of in a number of lizards. We do get one new Pokemon hiding away in the grass that has wandered its way all the way here with a 5% encounter rate, as we have Impidimp. It is a mischievous Pokemon that loves to sneak into people's houses to steal things and generally be a nuisance to their occupants. This allows it to feed on negative emotions that it causes, sucking them through its nose. In contrast, Impidimp itself will become irritable if it has no negative emotions to feed on, and they live in groups, practicing their troublemaking skills on each other. Pokemon that feed on negative emotions are by far some of the most interesting to me. They don't need to eat actual food, they don't need to take something positive that was created, they thrive off of literal negative energy and can in turn still be trained or cooperated with as positive creatures. They turn something of negative power into a new form that is effective and used against others, and I think that's really cool. It also means that Impidimp is able to feed on any other Pokemon or human as long as they can bother them in some capacity, all while hardly being attacked in return, unless it bothers the wrong individual. Gotta respect that, and move on to the visible encounters. We see Throw and Sock return, but the rest are at least new in this region. For example, a 15% chance of running into Coughing, finally, a Pokemon that is composed of gas pollution. Though it's more than just that, because Coughing also appears near volcanoes commonly, meaning that it could primarily be composed of water vapor, carbon dioxide, and sulfur dioxide, alongside a number of other gases as you get into the smaller and smaller parts per million measurements, and depending on the location. This would make a lot of sense when we consider their Cantonian evolution of wheezing. They are effectively a way to trap all of the gas into one singular place, a place that when hit by fire or electricity can cause a massive explosion and use up that gas as combustion, or alternatively, once it does collect enough and evolve, turn into something that can mix the gases and turn them into something new, no matter which form it evolves into. They get to float freely around these parts without any consequence. Appearing in the highest numbers, at roughly 40% of the time, we get Noctowl, a Pokemon of course we'd expect to primarily see at night as a nocturnal owl, hence the name Noctowl. It's more of a predator than before, but is likely choosing to go after Krogunk, Scraggy, and Choodle the most. But I'm sure all the hidden Pokemon except Roggenrola is in fact on that list of prey. Impidimp is a big maybe. It's a pretty obvious color, so personally if I was an owl, I'd go attack it. Surprisingly, we get Sudowoodo 30% of the time as well, meaning that it is absolutely horrible at hiding in these parts. They still weird me out in terms of how they fit into ecology, as at least in the anime, Bondly is shown to need nutrients to be hand-fed to it, so I half expect that they use their spheres to grind up minerals for themselves. It's really the only logical thing that I could come up with in previous versions of the Ecology series. Also, while on my partial business trip, partial vacation, I was able to actually find some Sudowoodo in the form of petrified wood. My entire family and my fiance, of course, made fun of me because I got wood, and you can imagine the stupid jokes we all made from there, but it was surprisingly low cost. It's apparently from Madagascar, so I'm not sure about the ethics of that necessarily, but hey, it's a great example to show in videos, and I got to geek out over it because this isn't wood, it's all rock. Every single mineral or particle that's in this thing that was wood, that was bark, was transformed into rock, and I'm gonna set it gently onto my desk so I don't break it or my desk. Moving on, we have a low chance of encountering Salandit, who is likely here just because of the warmer environment of this ancient town nearby. They're primarily eating bugs and other small mammals, but they aren't picky at the end of the day. Or at least the males aren't, as the only reason they can't evolve, according to the Dex info, is because they give all the nutritious food to female Salandit. This thing really needs an evolution for the males if they do get to have some protein just slapped into their mouths. Lastly, a Pokemon I'm surprised to see wandering around in the open is Hatena. The tail protrusion on its head constantly senses and captures other creatures' emotions. As such, it is a reclusive Pokemon, preferring to live in uninhabited areas. It tends to run away as fast as possible when it senses strong emotions, as exposure to it for too long will make it tired. It never warms up to anyone that does not have a calm disposition. So yes, the perfect Pokemon for our neurodivergent friends who get overstimulated all the time. Honestly, set a neurodivergent person up with one of these and an Audino, and you'll never feel upset, and you'll never have to go through your list of things wondering what made you feel bad today. Why do you feel negative today? Was it because I didn't eat? Did I not have enough water or sleep? Did I talk too much to friends even though I love them? Who knows? I gotta go through my list and test things out. Neurodivergence is real fun. But ultimately, it feels like Hatena will get far away from danger as much as necessary, and there might be a constant tug and pull from it and Impidimp in terms of emotions, which isn't unfounded since they are supposed to be opposites to each other. Entering Galar Mine number 2, we get a couple of friendly and not so friendly faces. The only hidden encounters are the ones inside the water, as you can go fishing, resulting in Choodle, Corphish, and Barboach. Simply put, Barboach is our bottom feeder, Corphish is attacking whatever it can for food, and so is Choodle for that matter. The difference though is that Corphish is going to be more mobile, while also being an invasive species in its own right. We have no home region for Corphish, as every single region says they came from somewhere else, or we can see they have incredibly low populations wherever we do see them, and it's only in one small location, in one small section in any region. There is no definitive home for them yet. The water honestly isn't much to talk about, and with Barboach taking up 55% of the population, it's clear that the waters here are murky, and these three are some of the only Pokemon in it because they have the ability to survive within it, unlike other Pokemon. Murky water means a lack of oxygen, means nothing to these bad boys. Meanwhile, on land, we do see Noibat, Choodle, Scraggy, Krogunk, and then a few Binacle, who are, of course, still doing as their evolution does as they filter feed. We do get the addition of Shellos, East Sea, making it clear with their 25% encounter rate that this is a great place for them to stay moist, and they don't have any real threats to worry about. At least, not any that can regularly get past their defenses, as they either don't have the claws, fangs, or general power to do so. The only other Pokemon with the same encounter rate is Wimpod, who is known as Nature's Scavenger, as it will eat just about anything whatsoever, dining and dashing at top speeds long before it can be caught by anything else. Now that I think about it, they also live in very humid environments and small caves, and if there's a lot of like dripping water or movement of water within these caves, it would explain why there's a small pool for our fishing Pokemon or fish Pokemon to exist. Though finally, before we would get into our special wanderers, we do get to see Shuckle here, a Pokemon that is effectively a slime mold that enjoys grabbing berries and holding onto them until they break down and ferment into a fine juice for it to absorb, all while it hides safely in its shell or under a rock or just pretends to be a rock. No predators to worry about with little Shuckle. Also in here, there is a Gastrodon East and a Dreadnought that do not respawn, but it's at least important to note them, considering the decent populations of their previous forms that we do see here. Meanwhile, there are several Galarian Stunfisk lying in wait underneath the surface. A scary thing to consider is that this kind of proves that the Pokemon truly have started taking over and returning this mine back to nature. After all, we don't get to see Trubbish here, who represents those mine tailings we talked about. Now, Galarian Stunfisk cannot generate electricity, but the high iron content of the mud it lives in has strengthened its fins, which have been adapted into an apparatus akin to a bear trap. It leaves its red and white mouth along with visible sharp teeth, which look similar to a Pokeball, visible to lure in prey, and then slams its fins shut on them so they cannot escape. This has turned it into what I would argue is a more effective predator, and yet another case in which Pokemon have adapted themselves to lure in humans. After all, we're just as much an animal as they are, no matter how smart we really think we are, and when there are too many of us, something has to come after us to lower our population and even things out. Galarian Stunfisk is taking the initiative as part of nature to do exactly that. But in the meantime, it'll just snap down on any other creature who steps on it. Our last spot before returning to the Slumbering Weald is the Glimwood Tangle, a place fit for the Fae as it is full of glowing mushrooms, causes people to get lost, and is home to the Fairy Gym. We only get hidden encounters in the area, an exception to some Impidimp who are always wandering around, and a Morgrem who does not respawn. Otherwise, Morgrem do take up 20% of the population here. They lack confidence in their physical strength, but they make up for it with cunning and dirty tactics. It feigns surrender by going down on all fours to lure its opponents, before it stabs them with its hair. It tends to lure people into the woods where it lives, and like Impidimp, it feeds on negative emotions, and some people believe that it has the ability to make crops grow. Why? Like, the only reasonable explanation I have is that its hair is similar to vines, and I guess that itself would be a trope in stories or anime, with even My Hero Academia having a character whose hair was literally vines, so maybe that's the tie-in? If you know a better explanation, let me know in the comments, please. Lastly, Morgrem is very popular with people who have gloomy thoughts. and its evolutionary relatives are a male-only species, which, with that same long hair, I just imagine, once again, like that neat trope that exists. Long, disheveled hair, never leaves their room, so on and so forth. Its diet hasn't changed, but it is a bit of a threat since it'll stab opponents. Now, following this, we don't have Eternatus, but instead Hattrem, who appears roughly 15% of their time. They make use of their ponytails as hands, pummeling foes with them. One blow from these ponytails would knock out a professional boxer. It perceives strong emotions, including positive ones, as if they're really loud noises. Thus, Hattrem will violently silence anything nearby expressing or feeling strong emotions. Once again, Pokemon of overstimulation that lashes out. And the primary reason it does so is actually because this line does get physically ill still if they are constantly exposed to these strong emotions. The easiest and most direct way to stop these emotions is to knock out the person releasing them, so I understand the gal. To follow, there's a 5% chance of running into Indeedee around these parts, but they're like attendants making sure nobody gets lost. They do derive energy and happiness from helping or serving others like the butlers that they are, so you might as well let them help you as they get energy in return from doing so. For those of you that decide you don't need Indeedee's help, then you might find yourself coming back to life after getting lost and passing away, because there is a small population of Phantom found around these parts, and the only thing they want is to at least play with others. They likely don't evolve into Trevenants here though, because the Glimwood Tangle is really dominated by a slew of Pokemon that aren't all that dangerous. Like, yeah, Morgrem is a bit of a threat, but if you don't fight it, then you don't get stabbed. It's just gonna bother you so it can eat your negative emotions more than anything, and as such, there will effectively never be a Trevenant here, all because neither the Pokemon nor the people threaten this place or each other. Instead, they live alongside it in harmony as one cohesive entity. We can find Spritzee and Swirlix roaming around, and they in turn might not only be getting their fill of the plants and mushrooms here, but might even find some interest in the Sinistea who float around. Sinistea is a Pokemon said to be created when a lonely spirit possesses a cold, leftover cup of tea. It is one of the shortest Pokemon in existence, and the teacup that it lives in is a famous piece of antique tableware. However, there are many forgeries in circulation. The swirl pattern on its purple body serves as a weakness, as should it get stirred, the swirl would disappear and cause it to get dizzy. This is because, as I claim, it is the mold on the tea and not the actual tea itself that is Sinistea. Now, it can absorb the life force of anyone who drinks it, and while it can wait patiently, most of its opportunities end up being short, as it tastes so bad that it is spat out immediately. It inhabits hotels and homes, and its antique form is highly sought after by certain enthusiasts. These collectors dedicate considerable time and effort to prepare the perfect tea and teacup, hoping that a Sinistea will come and possess their selections. Just imagine leaving a cup of tea out for weeks, if not months at a time, and just watching the mold grow on and hoping that it would just become one of these Pokemon. I'll admit, like, I've left a cup of tea out for too long, and I've watched it happen, and that will attract tiny flies, so no thank you. I will never actively do this. I have no idea what aroma, that they let off, but I guess there's still a chance that Spritzee might still be tempted to drink from it, or to at least absorb the smells from it to have a more bitter and robust scent waft from its body. To follow, there are Oranguru and Passimian here, and just like in Alola, these Pokemon serve to make sure that the forest continues to grow and flourish, with Oranguru directing other Pokemon with its intelligence, and Passimian using berries as both entertainment and a weapon, and as a staple of their diet. The seeds they leave behind from breaking fruit open just serves to restock the berries they eat up. Neither one of these Pokemon are a threat, despite their real-life counterparts having a more omnivorous diet. Coming in at roughly 20% is Shiinotic, which, despite first appearing in Alola, surprises me every time that it isn't a Pokemon we first see in Galar. It just kind of has Galarian vibes, doesn't it? Either way, while they are stated to feed on prey, it is shown in the anime that the energy they take won't kill a Pokemon or human as long as they eat, rest, and restore their overall energy. The primary reason why they would even take energy from others is because they serve to keep balance in a forest, having the ability to take energy from prey and give it to a dying forest to restore health. Explicitly stated, Shiinotic are benevolent, neutral party Pokemon that just want the forest to live. Lastly, we get one of the first Pokemon ever revealed within Galar, according to my memory at least, in the form of Galarian Ponyta. It can absorb the life energy located in the atmosphere and store it in its mane, which will then become more colorful and potentially release a shining glow if there is a lot of energy to use. Its horn has healing powers, as it can heal any slight wound with a few rubs from it. By looking into the eyes of a person, it can read the contents of their heart. Should it find any evil, it will promptly go into hiding, and as shown in Pokemon Journeys, the episode Tale of You and Glimwood Tangle, Galarian Ponyta can send pleas for help in the form of visions to people, even if they're from another region. It is quite literally a unicorn in every way of the unicorn myth, from medicinal horns to reading the hearts of others, so on and so forth, all while having a cotton candy mane that I'm sure some children try to eat. They can enjoy peace deep within this forest, eat their fill of grass, and absorb all the good life energy that they want. And we are back to the Slumbering Weald, the place where we will be finishing off for today, because yes, this video is already incredibly long, and I will have to complete all the wild areas in an entirely different video, because they have 18 distinct sub-regions that will take quite some time to break down, and you deserve an actual analysis, not just me rushing through it. So, I suppose I technically lied by saying this is the complete ecology, but I think if you've made it this far, you can forgive me. But as we finish here, let's see if you can see the theme within this Slumbering Weald before we wake up our legendary canines at the end. We now stand in the northern area. Our hidden encounters include Stunfisk at 5%, Corviknight at 20%, and a 5% chance of Butterfree to follow. They are eating their fill of pollen and honey before departing from this area, and they only exist in a 5% population as they depart for greener pastures full of flowers in a great migration. We follow this with another bug being Orbeetle. It is known for its high intelligence and large brain, which also grants it immense psychic powers. It emits its psychic powers to study and observe its surroundings, including objects over 6 miles or 10 kilometers away. It rarely uses its wings to fly, rather it moves about by levitating in the air, presumably by using its psychic powers. And in the water, we get to see Magikarp and Barboach return, alongside a 60% population of Wishcash. They are eating everything that falls into the water, but Wishcash also serve a greater purpose as a warning system, because long ago, in the real world, catfish were blamed for causing earthquakes, and the yokai known as Namazu were inspired by this. This was all because catfish would be seen going a little bit crazy before an earthquake, and eventually it was realized they were simply not causing them, but are aware of the disaster before it happened, turning them into a miniature early warning system. So then, so far, we have a lot of Pokemon that are able to travel far, protect the area, and monitor it pretty well. To follow, all of the fog in the area has to come from somewhere. And while you might think it's natural, it's likely being produced by the Pokemon with the highest land population in the northern area, Galarian Weezing. In the Galar region, its appearance has changed due to absorbing polluted air from factories. It consumes particles from polluted air and expels clean air instead of droppings. The toxins within its body are accumulated into poison gas clouds that leak and drift around it. The gas is its best weapon in battle, being potent enough to stun and immobilize an opponent with just a whiff. And it preys, quote-unquote, on Trubbish for the fumes that they produce. This is a great example of how unnatural pollution has caused it to change into this new form, as it purifies the air and releases the clean air it produces into the area. And the best part that solidifies my theory, it has the Misty Surge ability, creating a misty terrain in the entirety of this forest. And this is when I tell you that when you first saw Zacian or Zamazenta at the beginning of the game, they were never there. Because between all these Pokemon protecting the area, you also have a very strange instance of not seeing Musharna, but simply a Munna, a Pokemon that has the capability of not only eating dreams, but also bringing them to life. And they make up a quarter of the population, working to keep the dogs happy and projecting their image in front of you to scare you off when you get too close. This is why you couldn't hit them and they wouldn't hit you, because they were never there. But now we get to see both Zacian and Zamazenta awaken once more, ready to save the world one last time against the threat that is not just Eternatus, but is full-powered Eternatus. These canines are really interesting, and while I've made a strong claim on what they may be inspired by in other videos, it's here ecology-wise that we see they are simply spirits, quote-unquote, meant to protect Galar as a whole. They don't hunt other Pokemon, they don't attack humans, they sleep to regain the strength they need for when they are needed again. For when they are needed to stop a great threat like the darkest day, an event that blots out the sun and threatens all life, all of ecology in the entire region. Though instead of talking about Eternatus here and all the Dynamax Pokemon, I think I'll be saving that for the ecology of the wild areas. And trust me when I say I desperately wanted to get it all in one video, but I realized, one, my voice is completely ragged right now. Like, if I don't project, it is just raspy. You might have noticed it is, I'm using different parts of my throat to talk. But not only that, but this was 65.5 pages of script that I had to write out. And after recording, I still have to edit and upload it, and I'm pretty sure it broke the 3-hour mark. It might be just shy of 4 hours, but enough of that. I just want to say thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to subscribe for weekly content, share the channel with your friends, and leave a comment on your thoughts, as it all helps the channel immensely. And if you would like to go the extra mile, become a member for as little as $3 a month, as it helps support the channel, again, immensely. You get behind the scenes info, sneak peeks, and your name in the credits, and then don't forget to go check out my second channel with much shorter theories. Ecology will eventually be on there, so on and so forth. That will be less than 10 minutes long per video. It's just a fun little thing with a lot higher level editing. But with that then, as always, thank you so much for watching. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. Do anything I would do. Please be nice to each other. I love you, and I'll see you next time.